Date. And we are live with Batfo Haku here. We have both two special guests. We have Landon, goes by Pope DARPA.
Hello.
And then we have Carnage, which is Brian.
No.
Andre, actually.
I restart, redo, everything's
You
done.
do?
Good lord, sorry, we were just talking about Brian, but I have Andre
Oh my
here,
God.
who got third place overall, but more importantly, he actually won the Malifaux Adepticon tournament in Henchman Hardcore. How did that go?
It went great. So my boy Jordan was wanting to run around the dealer hall and was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to play." So I took his crew. It was Kaya, BB Calypso, and a Flush with Cash machinist, which felt very straightforward. But it turns out, when you play Henchman Hardcore, card manipulation is utterly fantastic, and EVS is good at that. So 5 quick rounds later, it was a solid W. There was actually some very hard matchups in that. There was like Thune, a Thune-led crew with a doppelganger, and he like iced all 4 models on multiple games. But BB and Calypso put a stop to that kind of thing. So yeah, it was actually a ton of fun. But I know not nearly as interesting as the real tournament.
Card
Yes.
manipulation does sound pretty important. You only get 4 cards in that format, right?
That is correct, and a maximum of 3 stones. So you're playing pretty resource light as it is. So anything goes a long way.
Yeah, it's I the Thune list. I just heard about that. That seems pretty good. But yeah, we also have the first place of the 50 Soulstone Masters tournament with us. You want to take a bow, a celebratory cheer right now?
Well, I'd take a few victory laps, but the medals they gave the 3 of us all look the same.
That is true. You can't tell the difference. So a little spoilers on there. We did all get medals. We have our tournament sheet right here. I can actually show you guys. And we have with us first place Landon, second place I got that, and third place we have Andre. And I figured we'll just talk about Adepticon a little bit. We'll give our thoughts on the style of format, because it was a bands format, which we're going to talk about a bit more. We'll go a little bit round by round, explain how the day went, how the tournament went, and then give some nice little conclusions and thoughts at the end of this about the state of the meta and where we think certain factions are, certain masters. Because this is a little bit different than Vassal League, we have double masters as an actual possible take, and you will see a little bit of that throughout this tournament, and we'll talk about why we think that's good, why we think that's bad, and yeah, we'll just cover a little of everything. So I figured we'll have our guests start off by explaining their round 1 games. I have the rankings on here, and we'll get to go little by little. I'm just realizing now I don't believe this ranking has the tournament data, but I also have that right here. So we are talking about round 1. We're going to have the strategy is going to be symbols of authority. We're on a wedge deployment. You have the schemes as assassinate, hidden martyrs, outflank, research mission, spread them out. And I guess to talk about it a little bit differently, because we do have our vassal maps that we're used to, and now we have in-person maps. Just in general, how did you guys feel about the map layout of Adepticon?
I'll take the first crack at that. For the most part, it was workable, I guess. I wasn't sitting down at the map and going, "Oh man, this is gonna be terrible." Except for one. There was like that haunted house with like the 2 bridges, and that was kind of obtuse, and there was like no concealing terrain on that map at all. So some of the maps were like, this isn't great. But for the most part, I would say like the median average of the maps were like, "Oh, this would be fine," or "This would pass." But there were some misses to be sure.
I'm trying to think, and I don't actually think I felt I ever played a map where it mattered to me. And maybe that was just the list that I took, but I can't think of a single time where terrain felt like it was super huge. I guess in my round 4 game, we had some height 2 fences that stopped Rusty Alice from drawing line of sight a few places. That might have been the most impactful terrain ever was in my 5 games. But you play enough incorporeal flying models that you don't tend to notice these sorts of things while you're playing.
Yeah, so we didn't really go over factions, but you guys both 10 Thunders this tournament. And I was an Arcanist player. So as the Arcanist player, goddamn, these maps were not great for me.
Well, you also played on what I think looked like the most miserable looking map round 4, just walking around the tables, right?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
map was brutal.
Yeah, that's the map you were talking about, right, Andre?
Uh, no, I was actually talking about a different map, tragically. But no, the one that we played on for round 4, it had this height 2 like boardwalk running the entire length of the map with like some buildings in the middle and in either end. And so there was not at the time that we looked at the map, there wasn't like any like boards up on one side. So somebody was just like not going to be able to charge across the center at all. And that felt both really impactful and uneven, which wasn't great.
Yeah, the funniest part about that map, and I guess we'll get to a little bit later, but after we were done with our game, no spoilers, the person who played on that map next, I played on the map right next to it. They found 2 more bridges to put onto that map to make walking up to the boardwalk, not a climb, and you could just walk up it. And it's just like, oh god, I wish I knew
I
about
love
this.
that.
But yeah.
That's beautiful.
So I think I'll just let you take it away, Andre, talking about round 1. Yeah, how was your round 1?
My round 1 was, well, pretty good for me. I matched up into an Anya 1 player as McCabe 2, who I soloed the entire tournament. And he hadn't really played in McCabe 2 before, wasn't really sure what his style was. But basically, at the end of turn 1, he had pulled McCabe deeper into his crew. And that was a bad idea because McCabe likes being in the middle of your crew. And so by the end of turn 2, he had lost like 2 or 3 models and was not aware that I had, that he's immune to hazardous terrain, and that's Anya's whole game for Anya 1. And so he was just kind of like, oh, cool. So my Grandmaster plan immediately fell apart. And so at that point, like we got halfway through turn 3, I think, and then he just called it. And he said it was like that first time he had ever quit a game at a tournament. But it was so far gone, and I had complete control of the map just because I didn't have to spend any time getting my master into the melee up the board. So it ended up going out pretty well for me.
Did you have any bans for your round 1?
I did ban Seeker because he picked Anya. I know that Mikhail and Anya are typically good friends, even post nerf, I think. And apparently it did actually impact his hiring because I also inadvertently had banned out what he wanted to hire, which was Austere and Twiggy, for some like spread them out kind of stuff. So my ban did come into play. He banned Monk, which is my favorite keyword to play with McCabe, so that wasn't great. But I hired a Kabuki instead, and the Greatsword did plenty of work in the Monk's absence, so it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, it's that great sword. I don't know. Having a lightsaber seems pretty decent.
Yeah, luckily McCabe has no shortage of good minions to tax in.
Yeah,
as long as you stay in Thunders for sure.
I guess we'll talk about bans a little bit more later and how we felt about them overall. So I guess we'll just kick it off to Landon. How did your game 1 go?
I played it against a local that I had actually already practiced this round with before, so the two of us really knew what we were doing already. I think we played pretty much the same crews we played in our practice game as well. So it was very much a sit down, start playing, and we slammed it out in about, I want to say like an hour, 10 minutes, all 5 rounds, which is probably the fastest I've ever played a game of Malifaux. But it was very, very rough for my opponents. He was playing Zoraida against my Yanlo 2, and he summoned a Voodoo Doll, which is a big no-no when you've got double blasts off of Komainu. So he summoned the Voodoo Doll. I double blasted onto, I think, Zoraida, Widow Weaver, and a summon Stitched. And then later on in the game, I did the same thing off of a Will-O-Wisp that he had hired, and it was just brutal blast damage for days, which made it relatively easy to just go pick up the symbols afterwards.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the document. You banned Nightmare out?
I think that might be a typo. I remember banning Nephilim because I decided I didn't want to see him mature, and I was okay with him taking the Widow Weaver if he wanted to, because he actually played the Widow Weaver, so I definitely did not ban Nightmare.
Oof.
But that's fine.
Well, what did he ban into you?
He banned, I think, Wastrel because Desper is good into symbols, but playing Yanlo, you don't really care what anyone bans because your keyword's so amazing you won't hire anything out of keyword in 9 out of 10 games. And if you do, it's usually Fuhatsu, who you can't ban to begin with.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yanlo's keyword pretty strong.
I'd say so.
Also, especially with Yanlo 2, you have the synergies of needing, ancestors, retainers, the minions, all that fun shenanigans.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I played my game. I was playing Arcanist this round, and I was playing primarily Mei Feng. I went up against one of our other locals who was playing Explorers, and he dropped Ivan 2 into me. And I won't lie, part of the game rests on the fact I think that he didn't really know Mei Feng very well, and I was, very intimate with Ivan as being a normal Explorers player. Ivan 2, I don't see that much, mostly because I'm just not a big fan of him. He has some weird restrictions that you guys may or may not know about on once per turn rulings.
Activation.
Yeah, sorry, once per activation. Being a little silly there, but once per activation rulings, which for those who don't know, for example, Deva has made to kill on it. When it's summoned or placed, you can normally get a free attack on it with the made to kill, but because it says once per activation on it, it has to be during an activation. Ivan 2 summons it during the start phase, I believe,
Correct.
not during an activation, therefore they can't take the attack. It's the same thing with the free obey that's on one of his hidden upgrades. You can't target someone to take a charge action because a charge action says once per activation. And those caveats actually do, I think, really hurt the master as a whole. But overall, it just really helped that I felt that Mei Feng kind of counters what Ivan 2 does, which is not really attack you at all, but try to spread out on the map. My opponent did some nice little shenanigans, obviously using Ava, who can use the lockdown ability, so you can only take walk actions nearby 2 inches around a marker. So he would commonly try to just make it like, this symbol you just can't pick up. And it was cute, but overall, it just died to the swarm of Mei Feng models going in there, pinging people with scrap, and just not needing to attack models, and therefore never caring about like the distracted condition, for example, which Ivan 2 hands out a lot.
Did he ever end up actually using that action on a strategy marker, or just something near it?
Something near it, because
Okay, good.
Right, as people may not know, the general ruling and I think the easy consensus by reading the rules is you can't target strategy markers with abilities at all. And that would include Ava's lockdown ability. Because, yeah, if he was targeting it, that would be pretty great. So technically, I guess there were a few chances where I could have walked behind the model or behind the symbols perfectly with a 30 mil base, but I think my only summoned Metal Gammon died pretty quickly. Our non-summoned Metal Gammon died pretty quickly, and I wasn't able to do that. But Mei Feng, I just warped around. I didn't really care. It was a game where your opponent doesn't quite know what you're playing, and therefore you have a pretty good advantage. Something I guess important to announce now, because this did kind of impact my turn 1 game, is that our tournament rounds were only 2 hours and 15 minutes long. So we had some pretty quick games overall, and I had for the first time it basically going to time. Around round 4, and there was just no way for us to get to round 5. It didn't change the game at all. It might have changed the scoring a little bit, but I think I won that game by about 5 points. Yeah, I think I won that game by 5 points, and so it was never really changing much for time. Either way, my bans, as you guys can see on the screen, was Apex, because I really think Crypsis cores were a thing I was worried about seeing higher than Ivan. Huge fan of him. If you guys don't know, you should definitely hire them. You give them fast focus. They can focus on their turn, and they can take some really long-range focus shots to do some really good damage. Also, Ivan hands out conditions, so there's almost always somebody to get free suits on at the time.
So to be clear, it wasn't because you were afraid of being blown the fuck out by eagles.
Uh, it was coincidental that I do think Hyperion Eagles are one of the best scheme runners and explorers right now. And picking up symbols would be a pretty good job for them to do, to just walk 12 inches and then take a free bonus action against me and maybe just, Red Joker windmill slam me for 6. So no, I'm fucking terrified of those Eagles. One shot of Metal Gammon.
They are move 7. It's 14 inches followed by windmill slamming you.
My bad, 14 inches. That's how good they are. And plus, scout them out on Wedge. I mean, probably basically useless, but,
So much value.
Is he going to be on the tip of the wedge?
I won't lie. The fact, coincidentally, I think my opponent actually said that my ban impacted him because he's a fan of hiring Model 9, actually. So I incidentally banned a model that I wasn't sure I was hitting.
Oh, cool.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, because that's not a model I'm used to seeing that often.
Did he say why he liked Model 9 out of curiosity?
I think it was just mostly movement shenanigans.
Okay. Like, I could see it for symbols. He's got a bonus action that gets him out of engagement, right? And then he's just a tanky boy.
Yeah, like, as I'm saying now, with the nerf of Beep Calypso, you need to look at different scheme and strat runners. And I actually think Model 9 is definitely not bad for doing the strat markers, because unlike Vernon, he can actually, get out of engagement.
Yeah, no, it actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, between Mobile Warrior, Run and Gun, and Blade Rush, like, he's got a lot of options to get out of melee and then just go interact with something. So I actually like that pick.
Yeah, I do too. I'm happy I incidentally banned it, because, I mean, obviously, just before it was always Beep Calypso, and I think this is an alternative I didn't quite see coming into play. But I can definitely see it after being told about it. I can see it.
Yeah, like, holy shit, that's a lot of distance. You charge 5, throw knife 8, chart, place in base, then bonus action, push 5 out. I mean, it's a lot of suits involved there, but, like, that's pretty good.
You are a henchman, and you are part of a faction that can recoup stones, kind of. So yeah. That's round 1. Round 2, we have a few more interesting things happening. How did your round 2 go, Andre?
I got a tie that I feel like I didn't earn against Landon. So it was my McKay, because of course I'm a simple-minded man, into Landon's Jacob 2. And basically you had, and I might be ruining a friendship here, but you had already kind of forewarned me, like, dude, watch out for that Huggy Alpha, it's big. And I was like, is it that big though? Like, I've seen Alpha Crews, and I wasn't truly a believer yet. So I still hired things that were perfectly bite-sized for Huggy to kill, like the Rough Rider. I had hired 2 of those, and then he also went after my Corpse Curator. And yeah, no, so it really came down to I just, like, didn't react at all in, like, a crew build understanding of how Huggy I think was going to act, and then just, like, getting lucky. Basically, turn 1, he went in and ate one of my Rough Riders, who would run off to the side to try and pick up a cheeky turf marker, because it was turf. Was it corner?
Corner turf, corner?
Yeah.
So
I guess it was Turner, turf 4 corner, Vendetta, catch and release, bait and switch, assassinate, detonate charges. I have it on the screen for people to read if they want to read.
Yeah, and frankly, so yeah, turn 1, Huggy, like, YOLO'd out. He got pulled off the board by Jacob, and then ran in and killed that Rough Rider that went off to go score one of the the left or right turf markers. And then turn 2, he continued to YOLO in, and tried to one-shot Corpse Curator, and only did not one-shot Corpse Curator, because he definitely had the cards in hand to do so, by Black Jokering the attack. And which was great for me, because she was my Vendetta bearer. And was also in a claimed turf corner, so it saved me the turf point and my Vendetta point on that Black Joker. And then I just proceeded to try and, like, climb my way out of the swamp I had created for myself to actually score points. And I would say, in addition to that, like, play of the game goes out to my Thunder Archer that I hired to be able to finish off both Huggy and Jacob on turn 4, I want to say, before they got to activate.
Yeah, that was big.
That was pretty chunky. The assassin rule came in big, because he got to, like, reposition in between 2 shots, and it was it was gratifying. But like I said, I only got to that point like as close as it was because of that big black Joker turn too.
From my perspective, it was a bit of a cheeky play playing Lynch to begin with. I know we had talked in the car a little bit about what people should be banning, and I wanted to fucking slap Longton, but he was driving when he mentioned King Golf. Because as anyone who's played my Lynch list knows, the big thing that makes it work is I hire two Kunoichi and they throw shurikens at Huggy to give him focus with their built-in mass trigger for Galvanize. And luckily, anyone who saw me today just kind of gave me a big question mark and went, Monk? Which was music to my ears as I proceeded to not hire any low for monks anyways. Although,
Yeah.
amusingly enough, both times I kind of wanted a Charm Warder and couldn't get it because it's also a monk.
There was a funny Andre led to it, but we were practicing before this, and this is actually one of the reasons why I haven't uploaded a video to my channel yet, because all my games were practice games for Adepticon. With Bands format, I didn't want it known, and I was talking about some Lynch lists that he could play in Thunders because he was realizing he just didn't want to play Neverborn, and we can talk about that more later. But I was talking about Landon's Huggy Alpha list because he used to play Nekoma, and it's a similar kind of Alpha style, at least, even though they play differently. And we were trying to remember how focus get added onto Huggy, and I just couldn't remember. And that's one of the reasons Landon gets to dodge the ban as well. But I'm looking at your bans now. You guys both banned Oni?
I think that's incorrect. I believe I banned Oni and he banned Monk.
Yeah, that's correct. Which is why the Charm Order didn't come in.
But I mean, that's just because I think a lot of this info was entered manually by hand last minute by a sleep-deprived TO who did an amazing job for us. We have to
Yeah, it
thank
was a
him for flying
well-run
out
tournament.
from Boston, so it was good.
Yeah, mad shout out to Brandon for even writing this down. And I know he had a lot of hard time, even from me, for getting the bans because we would just not remember to write them down on our tournament sheet when we handed
it would have
in.
been helpful if it had like a little segment for us to write it down in addition to like the Masters played. I think that was probably part of why everyone was forgetting, but I'm not sure that was thought out at the time the sheets were printed. So it is fine. But I guess back to the match. The other thing I do want to somewhat publicly apologize for is in the time that we were playing. You know, turn one was a little rough for me as I was still shaking off some rust of not playing on Vassal and trying to play in the 215 tie limit. So there's one moment at like the third or fourth activation where I'd pulled up Huggy and I'd put him in such a spot and tried to keep measuring a few things. And then Andre measures out to it. I'm like, well, I could have put it here. Do you mind if I put it here? And he's like, okay. And then he measured out to it again. And I'm like, well, actually, I could still put it here. And he's like, dude, I'm just trying to play the models on the board. And I'm like, I'm being a dick here. I need to like just leave the models where they are. We're not playing Vassal. I can't be perfect. We're playing in 2 hours. I'm wasting way too much fucking time on this. And so,
no worries.
and as part of my apology, I extended that whole, wow, we're not playing Vassal. I didn't mark Bill's fast when he revealed his scheme. And I forgot to tell Andre that he gained fast until I was taking my last activation of the turn because I actually hadn't even marked it down on my card. I was taking my actions. I'm like, oh, I can actually kill this archer since I have a third AP from fast that I would have gotten. He's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I have leverage. He's like, well, I wouldn't have cheated like this. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. You wouldn't have cheated if I had told you I had fast. I was like accidentally hiding this, not on purpose, because I fucking forgot about it myself. But
Right.
kind of just like gave it up because I didn't deserve it.
Real
So
life.
those were the two like things that stuck out in my mind. And then the Thunder Archer, of course, chose to bite me in the ass and kill Lynch before I activated that next turn. I'm like, damn it, I should have killed him.
Dang.
There was
And
speaking
then the
of
Black
real
Joker
life,
karma did come back around in that on the
did.
last turn, you Black Jokered your leap with Desper, which, if properly played, probably would have gotten you the W of 4-3. I'm trying to think. There might have been like some cheeky play I could have got to score detonate off of my bait and switch, but yeah, it was big.
There was something slightly else interesting that happened in that game. Do you remember talking about real life Malifaux?
The lights just like went out.
Yeah, we lost power during the game.
You say during the game, but I'm pretty sure it happened after our game finished.
Oh, so you guys
We
finished
literally
that early?
just finished. No, it was like not even 5 seconds after like, all right, cool, 4-4 tie, and the lights just like went out. And we had finished probably 20 or 30 minutes before the round officially ended. And so you can hear the TO yelling out, be like, all right, boys, we're gonna get a time extension in here. Because it was just super weird. We just lost power for like probably a minute and a half, I want to say.
Yeah, I actually think it was a little bit longer than that. It was almost like 5 minutes we lost power. Thankfully, it came on back on pretty fast still, but yeah, it was pretty fun. There was a lot of cheering going on, and I think I guess you guys were done with your game, but pretty much me and everyone else just immediately whipped out their phones and were like, especially me, because I'm always concerned about time in real life games, and I'm just like, all right, got my phone, got my light on, let's go. We're not done. We're still going. But yeah, that was actually a pretty exciting moment.
How did your game go?
My game went pretty well for me, if I'm being honest. We went out for lunch right before this. We talked a little bit about what models we're playing and what we think is good, and that includes with my opponent because I ended up playing against Brian. And
Brian from Texas, for the listeners at home, not Brian from Des Moines, also known as Brian Schemes, as he decided that he was too good for Adepticon.
yeah, he didn't want to. Kyle wasn't coming, so Brian couldn't come. So we had to get Texas Brian in to replace him. But yeah, so we had a personal glitch, and we all went to lunch, and we're talking about, I was mentioning that there's a cool little trick with Mei Fang where you can hire Hoffman 2 as a second master, and Command Construct that's on Sparks and also on Josh is specifically non-leader. So you can actually command Construct onto Hoffman to laser the same target twice in one round and do 8 irreducible damage. And he didn't keep this knowledge in his mind. So I slept on telling you guys my bans for the first round because my opponent, coincidentally, round 1, banged Augmented. He was like, I'm not really sure what I should ban. I'm just going to bag Augmented. Hoffman has some silly stuff. So I ended up playing against Brian. He plays Von Stuck, surprising literally nobody. I'm not even sure he brought another master. And then
He didn't play other keywords?
Yeah, he plays other keywords. He plays Riva, and he plays
Jackdaw. And he brought Jackdaw.
Yeah, Jackdaw.
He brought Riva too, didn't he? Didn't he play Riva one of the rounds?
No, he didn't have the models painted in time.
That sucks.
Yeah, because he has mentioned me Riva 2 is good. But either way, he ended up playing Von Stuck 2. He was thinking about bans, and he was kind of waffling, and I was thinking, I know he plays only in keyword, because both of our Texas members you guys aren't fan of playing outside of keywords.
No, it's a necessary evil in McCabe, but I try to play in keyword wherever possible.
Yeah, so I did some slight mind game shenanigans, and I just went, yeah, you know what, fine, I'll just go with no ban, whatever. And then Brian decided to also go with no ban. I don't know if my decision influenced him at all, so he went with no ban. Bam, second master hire Hoff 2, and it went as I think anyone would suspect, because as I just told you, this list is just nutty. I got lasers down on everyone at the beginning of round 1. I was able to just pop. I popped Lovelace for 4, and I popped the Student of Steel for 4. And threatening the kill on him, I did decide to warn Brian that I could then command Construct again to do it again. I don't know if that changed. It ended up not changing his play. But unfortunately, I didn't actually just go with it and snipe the Steel again, because he did just end up going with Steel healing back up. So I didn't get a lot of good damage in early, and it actually was a very interesting game for about the first 3 rounds, even talking about how disgusting it is, because he was able to run forward with Anna, get the very important hostile work environment, so I wouldn't be able to command Construct onto Hoffman. And then I would go forward with Sparks to put my hostile work environment onto Lovelace so that he couldn't pull Lovelace out with Stuck 2. And we had a little back and forth with that. He ended up placing Hoffman in front of Sparks and Lovelace, and then saving Lovelace. So it was a little bit of saving Private Lovelace action, keeping her healed, keeping her alive. But by round 3 with the damage from Hoffman's laser, the damage from Sparks doing packed with explosive trigger onto a metal gammon, as well as I believe I put it on mechanized pork chop. I was just able to be spread out on the map using scrap markers, with Rockhopper protecting my scrap markers from he picking them up with, like, for example, Valedictorian does it really easy. He picks up all, I think, like within 6 almost. Is it 4 or 6? Either way, he has a very wide range for picking them up. Rockhopper prevents that. So we had a lot of like counter tech to each other and going back and forth, but ultimately the consistent damage of me not needing cards just came into play where I use my 2 high cards on Hoffman every turn to get some nice lasers in, and then every other thing I was just willing to fail because all I'm trying to get out is scrap marker ping damage, not really worrying if I actually hit with an attack or not. And it's just all this consistent damage, the irreducible damage. I was able to pick apart his crew by turn 3, and then the game was basically just mine to play for. I think I only won by 3 points that game. It was still overall actually decently close, as I was talking about. The power went off on our turn 4, and so we had to we whipped out our phones, played by flashlight for a little bit, which was pretty cool, honestly. And then, yeah, I think that was about it. So I played the most cancer-ass thing into Brian and, probably destroyed our friendship. Which, if you
it
guys...
certainly gave him a lot to think about.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was his ride for the whole weekend, so he had to at least pretend that he was on a friendly terms with me. But, yeah, I tend to seem to play, apparently, these very oppressive, very annoying double master lists into people named Brian. And I think that this guaranteed the ban on Augmented for every other game I played.
Well, it is important to have a brand, so I'm glad that you stuck to it. But yeah, no, that was definitely heinous even just hearing about it, and definitely solidified, for me at least, that Augmented is nearly always going to be the ban if they're not already playing it.
Yeah, I think it has to be. I don't know. I mean, particularly with Mei Fang, obviously, because you get the Sparks higher. But even if you're not hiring Sparks, any other list can hire Josh to do the same thing. And Josh inherently isn't even that bad. He'll still have the power token generation from Hoffman, because that's not, none of Hoffman's stuff is leader restricted. So, yeah, it's going to be a very scary threat to hire into basically any Arcanist master if you have a second master format. Almost to the point, I think, of rendering second master format almost unplayable if you don't have bans. I really think that this combo is just a little bit too strong. Or a lot too strong. You guys probably think it's just bonkers broken, and you're probably right.
It's not even getting to the fact that, like, on certain maps, pylons will just break it.
Yeah, but hey, you can decide to, move pylons now, right? Right? It's totally
Yeah, you
fair.
can spend an AP walking to the pylon, spend an AP slamming the pylon, and then, that's cool. Now I can get through with one model.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not great. I will say I really didn't use pylons at all, because I will, you'll see later, but I do just play Hoffman a couple of times. I didn't really use the pylons at all for blocking anything anymore. I never thought it was honestly that strong to begin with. I mean, when it was used to literally be like, you can never score this strategy ever, obviously it was broken. But from a turn of blocking things, it's actually pretty hard to set up in a way that you're blocking good lanes while also positioning Hoffman well and keeping 6 within, or keeping the 3 you need within 6 of him. And it's not terrible, but you could only move them before with the bonus action. Now you can move them with, obviously, an action, which actually makes it almost easier to block. But in Hoffman proper, you just don't have the models to do that, or the AP to do it. I could have seen doing it more in Mei Fang, but honestly, it's just more important to just get out there and just fight the scrum with Von Strook too. Maybe if he was playing a more like schemey one, it would be pretty interesting to try to use my own models to move pylon markers to block it, but that wasn't the game to try that.
It's fair.
I I guess we'll move on to round 3. Did Brian say anything else about our game? Because
Mostly that he felt a fool. I feel like the the second time you play into anybody or any matchup, you're always going to be like, all right, cool. What happened last time is not going to happen twice. And he certainly feels like he has some sauce, even if he had to play into the double master matchup. Bans aside, he feels like there's some ways that he could play around it so that it wasn't long term hopeless. But he did not divulge too much information into what his plan was for that. And I think I will let him keep his secrets on that for now.
good, because I think we were talking about maybe having like a show match rematch of round 2, which could be kind of fun. Because I won't deny I sucked him out on that one. I practiced against Andre here. We've played a few games before Adepticon, and I made sure to never play Hoffman as second master when I was playing Mei Fang, because I wanted to keep it a secret. I wanted to be able to surprise Peekaboo somebody and be like, look at this disgusting thing, and then them to go not having hired for them and just the tournament shenanigans, which it's odd to intentionally trying to do that. I almost feel like bad about it, but it's like I wanted to win the tournament, but I don't know.
I think
It's
that's
weird.
just what bans does.
Yeah.
Gives you that dirty feeling.
Yeah, it does give you that dirty feeling. Especially because I know, like, obviously I'll have this podcast about it. I'll talk about it other places now that it's out there. And I could only do this at one tournament. And then it'll never work ever again. But it's... So that part's kind of weird for me in particular, too. But it's interesting. It's an interesting format on what it brings up on like the social aspects of it, on like talking about what lists you'll potentially play or what to pick or ban, because we had those conversations multiple times. But we'll save that discussion, I guess, for a little bit later, as I keep postponing all these things, and we'll just move on to round 3 right now. So round 3, I'll go over the scheme of strats. It's recover evidence, a good old GG1 scheme, and we're playing with all GG2 rules, so summoning models can't interact with it. All the standard stuff we're used to playing, just recover evidence as a strat. We have standard deployment, breakthrough, detonate charges, claim jump, hidden martyrs, deathbeds, and yeah, that's it. Andre, I'll let you take it away. Talk about round 2 or 3.
3, yeah. So round 3, I played into Joe. I think that's his name. Yeah, I think it's Joe. And he brought Shenlong as his master hire. I, of course, hired McCabe too. And then for bans, I ended up banning out Last Blossom, which was apparently big for him. And the his ban into me was, I want to say, Oni? No, that wasn't it. What did he ban out? I forget what he banned, honestly.
Out, according to this, he banned out, these can't be right. Oh, there's Joe. Okay. He banned out Qian Gong.
Qian Gong, that's right. He must have heard about my solid Kabuki play into the Anya 1 earlier. But anyway, with that map, I thought to myself, might as well fight fire with fire, so I hired a High River Monk as my out-of-keyword minion workhorse. And then just kind of went to town. He hired Fuhatsu, a Wind Golem, Shadow Effigy, and then a couple of Wandering River Monks, a Huckster, and I don't think he hired Sensei Yu. And he hired a Low River Monk as well. And so basically really what it came down to is I just started unloading at a range because I had Rough Riders still. I took 2 Rough Riders in every game. And you just start putting holes in things downrange, and the Wind Golem had placed off to the side, so he wasn't getting any middle of the storm protection. And so once that damage kind of started coming down, he was like, oh man, I have to get up the board. And so he started moving up the board with his boys, and once McCabe and the High River Monk, juiced out on upgrades, in particular, the Warrior and the Precise upgrade. Like Fuhatsu got bodied really fast, because he's not a henchman anymore, and so he can actually die now. And I think the highlight reel is that at one point my High River Monk took 7 attacks in a round, because he had fast, flurry, and hit the quick action trigger 3 times.
Jesus.
and I was cheating. I was cheating like every attack. So I'm cycling cards the whole time. He's landing every hit. It was gross. It was really, really gross. I love High River Monk with McCabe, and it was really sad to like to beat your old keyword to death with your new master. But frankly, High River Monks are a lean machine that McCabe can use, and to great effect. Because basically, I was concerned about if he could just chi out and dodge my attacks. But if I also have chi, that is not a problem.
I'm
And that
just
ended
glad
up.
your High River Monk's getting a home somewhere, even if it's not Shenlong.
Yeah, no, they crave the card manipulation so badly, and it works for them. Like I said, McCabe, it works for the High River Monk, and I'm glad. Yeah, you're right. That I'm glad they get to finally have a place somewhere because with Shenlong just didn't quite have what they needed in terms of support. But yeah, it turns out being able to cheat every attack and still have a full hand is exactly what High River Monks needed. And so I took that game 7-4, I want to say.
If I may offer some insight, I had actually practiced this round with Joe P, as he's one of our locals. And so this round we had originally practiced. He had never really played the double master thing before, but he hired Misaki in our practice game, and it worked out reasonably well for him. In that, Misaki's just like, if you're going to hire any second master in Thunders, it's probably got to be Misaki, right? Just because she's so independent and does a good number of different things. So regardless of what models your opponent decides to kill, you still have something that covers that gap. But I think in the list that I had played, he had played Misaki because we hadn't banned anything out, and because at that point I don't even think we knew it was a bans format, and he had
Yeah,
not played the Wind Golem or Fuhatsu, so I think that's what came into sub for it.
That makes sense. Well, and yeah, I definitely felt like the list seemed thrown together in some fashion. Because Fuhatsu, like pre-nerf, like hell yeah, every Shin crew. But post-nerf, I don't feel like he has as much of a place with Shenlong. Like I feel like you get more value out of a Thunder Archer at this point for cheaper and with
Interesting.
more synergy.
I disagree with that, especially the cheaper pits. It's only one stone, but that's a discussion for another time.
For sure. But Desper's the other person that came up big in that matchup, just because like recover evidence is basically Desper's favorite strategy as far as I'm concerned. Being able to just like leap into melee. Yeah, leap in, interact, leap out. And he also did quite a bit of counter scheming because he kept trying to set up detonate charges. And I kept just being able to steal the ski markers out from under him. So, as always, Desper did Desper things. And it was a fun game. I have to say it was. But he said he'd learned some things as well. He didn't know he'd pick up all ski markers and base contacts. That was a big one, among other things. But yeah, it was a good game.
Yeah, I think that's a rule that's just not like well known.
Well, and to be fair, I think this is Joe P's first year of this is his second tournament. So, I mean, 7-4, you said? That's a pretty impressive score for playing a top player in your second tournament ever. So,
yeah, very respectful.
I'll give him a pat on the back for that.
Yeah, no, Joe's actually a pretty good player, especially for just having picked it up not long ago. I didn't know he actually. I'm actually surprised by that because I didn't know that he picked it up recently. So no, he seems quite good. Landon, you want to talk about your game then?
Yeah, sure. So the 7-3 that happened for my game is probably a bit less, or it sounds more generous than the game was, as I played Yoko 2 into Andres Bay Nakima, piloted by some gentleman who also ended up hiring in Titania as a second master. So you've got that second master dog whistle immediately going out of the gate, and I just said, you know what, I don't even care. I don't even think I knew he was hiring Titania because we, for whatever reason, didn't want to use the app for that game, which in retrospect seems somewhat fishy considering they're supposed to be the second master declaration phase. But it didn't end up mattering to me at all. I think I ended up going with my typical Yoko list where I'll hire a Kanoichi, a Fuhatsu, then Bill, Kitty Dumont. He had not banned Honeypot. He had banned something that was...
I believe you played against Andrew, and he banned Last Blossom, because he's the only person who played against Yoko
Last Blossom.
in round 3.
That's right. He didn't really know what to ban, so I think he actually tried to say Bandit, and I'm like, Bandit's not a keyword you can ban, my friend. Did you mean Last Blossom? And he's like, yeah, sure, that one. So I think he had been more familiar with like a basement meta of him and his friend. And so it was cool that he had, gotten 2 wins or a win and a tie at that point in time. But it was clear that he wasn't quite terribly experienced with the game at that point, especially not even knowing what the app was really. But anyways, what ended up happening is I took Sadir instead of my usual Hinamatsu take in the list. So he ended up pushing his models forward, but he tried to be like a little bit careful and kind of did a half measure, which ended up killing him more than anything. Because if you're going to go with a hard and fast Nephilim crew, you got to go all the way in or not in at all. Going like a little bit up the board is just going to get you shot to death, which is what happened. He tried to hide some Nephilim behind rocks. Sadir just used Blow It to Hell to remove the cover from the rocks. Shot his mature Nephilim that had used Ride With Me on his young. Blasted off the mature onto the young. Then Fuhatsu followed it up with another blasting shot, and I pulled off 17 points of Nephilim turn 1. And at that point in time, it's like, what do you do?
Yeah, for a Nephilim dive, you either have to go no cheeks or both cheeks. Half-assing that is not advisable.
Yeah, so that was a little rough. I think he then turn 2 decided, oops, didn't go in deep enough, and then just jammed Nekame into me. And at that point in time, he jammed Nekame into an unactivated Bill, who then just, I think, put out literally 12 damage in that one activation. He had only taken 3 stones, so it was a dead Nekama because she had taken some flack from Fuhatsu's extra AP the previous turn. And so I think at the start of turn 3, he had Titania and a Blood Hunter left, and I had taken no casualties. So he ran in. I think he killed my Kunoichi, who was my hidden martyr I had taken, because I figured, surely he'll kill something in, a Nekama list. So I had taken it on Chiyo and my Kunoichi. So he's like, God damn it, I killed the one model that had hidden martyrs on it. I'm like, yep. But in turn, he got an evidence for it. So then he tried to run away turn 5, I think. And I ended up just pushing Chiyo 17 inches across the board and double walking. He's like, holy crap, that list's fast. And I'm like, yes, it is.
Yeah, Yoko can do some silly things.
And I only go into so much detail because I know people are not seeing enough Yoko 2 for how good she is.
Yeah,
So-
it's definitely hard to dive Yoko as well, in particular, to go all ass in, as you guys are putting it, because those 2 pass tokens, oh my god, that's brutal for a dive to have to go in and then watch them have 2 more activations.
Yeah, you get some brutal crackbacks because I'd also cheated a high card turn 1 to make sure he went first, knowing that I could pick it up later with Information Broker.
Oh god, so you had 3 activations in a row.
4, but yes. Or maybe it was 3. It was 3 or 4. Because I think he also had a pass token he didn't use, so it was 4.
Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah, that's the classic thing that I gotta say. Even some experienced players do this, and it's just weird. Use your pass tokens turn 1. Just fucking do it. It doesn't make sense to just give your opponent all that extra information and power over you.
I will say that actually was one of the defining factors in my round 1 as well, is my opponent kept the pass token, and I was able to go with Metal Gammon with Packed Explosives and Pork Chop with Packed Explosives completely without having to have a single care in the world what they're doing. So I just walked in, started exploding up all of my stuff with my Metal Gammon, and then I walked in with a drop the scrap marker, and then I just walked in with Pork Chop and did the exact same thing, using Reckless to proc his shielded. And it's just like, okay. Oof. Use your pass tokens, guys, please. But, yeah, I guess with that, we'll talk about my game. So, as we just mentioned, the power just went out right before this round started. And I bring this up again because I'm playing against, I believe his name is Cole, going by this, and I believe that's right. Maybe I'm getting this wrong, I'll be honest, but that is the only person who played against May and Bagnall Augmented, so I'm pretty confident I'm right. He's one of the Ohio players. I think he's the Ohio henchman, and he just came up. And I bring up the power because he was developing a pretty bad migraine, and he was going to go to his room at the convention to go pick up like some Tylenol or aspirin that he had, and the elevators were out of power. and they still didn't have the elevator started back up, and he didn't want to climb up. I think like he said 14 stairs or something like that because he was that high up, and
Ouch.
so he just walked all the way there. He rushed over there with a headache. Then he had to rush back so he could be in time for our game. Thankfully, the TO actually, good guy Brandon, comes by and offers some Tylenol that he had. So he did eventually get it, but he was kind of out of it, and I think it was pretty obvious from our games that he was a little out of it. But he picked Tony against my Mei. He did correctly ban Augmented, and I also banned Augmented. Is that right? I think that's right. I would have thought about banning Performers because I'm so used to Duet being an annoying model. But I don't know what Tony hires anyways, because I honestly almost never see this model. And the only one I do know who runs it is Plog, and he does hire the Duet. So if I banned Augmented, it's because I didn't want to get owned by my own tech. And I think that might be right. I think I might have done it just because I was afraid of him hiring Hoff too. Either way,
It's tragic.
yeah,
I was just gonna say, go ahead.
No, yeah, go.
Oh, I was just gonna riff real quick. I was like, it sounds like that the TO shut down your otherwise flawless sabotage plan for your round 3 opponent. I mean, you got the lights to go out, you made the power go out, and all that. And you still had the Tylenol on him. That's pretty rough. I'm glad you came back.
It's actually because he was expecting to play one of us round 3, and then we just colluded to tie to push it out.
Yeah, that's true. Both of those. As you know, I'm this devious mastermind apparently, trying to play to the people, not to the game, in order to sneak my wins through. And I learned all of this from Landon, by the way, who told me how to pick bans for banning keywords. That's on you, Landon. So Brian, blame Landon. He's the one who told me that.
Watching you.
Yeah, Landon's the one who told me to go with the cheeky, just say no ban and kind of offer like you're just not doing anything, or recommend a ban if they're waffling on one. So that's blame Landon. I learned from watching him. Either way, though, he banned Augmented because he wasn't sure what to ban. The second player, he just coincidentally did that. Very smart. And I had to play my normal Mei Feng game. Instead of bringing Hoffman, I really just bring a Metal Golem and Metal Gammon, because those are really good models. And in my Hoffman list, the Metal Gammon is a rail worker instead, because I don't prioritize getting like the Metal Gammon run in and bomb as much. I prioritize rail worker throwing my guy forward. So I do try to do both. It really depends on the list. You get really close on Soulstone sometimes. But besides the point, he played Tony. The map wasn't terrible, but it wasn't that great. He ended up clumping because obviously that's what you do as Tony and want to do as Tony. But that just gets blown the fuck out by Mei Feng, and that's what we saw really quickly. The one thing we didn't catch, and this happened a couple times where I did kind of like remind my opponent, oh, I can't do this, except for I didn't even know about this in the first place, was I charged a model within 6 of Amanu? Amanu? I don't remember her name.
The henchman.
Tony's henchman. You can't charge within 6 of her. We didn't pick up on this until a couple rounds later, but then I tried to help remember like the small auras that he had, because he was having like a rough time of it at this point. Either way, he was clumped. I get in there with the Gammon. I get in with pork chops. I'm using the packed explosives. I'm just doing a bunch of damage. The crew he hired was, I can't remember if I can remember all of it, but there was a couple interesting takes where it was Tony, her henchman. He hired the Effigy, which caught me a little bit by surprise, so I had to pay attention to the can't heal aura. And then, what other cute little things did he take? I think from there it's pretty standard keyword stuff, honestly. So that's like Willy or something. I'm sorry, I really don't remember Tony's keyword. This is how like rare I see it. All of it really didn't matter much though, because I never had to attack the models. I really just had to sit there with my crew, have pack the explosives go off, drop scrap, have the scrappy pit trap markers, and he was all clumped together, and it just went downhill from there. Especially once I learned that Rockhopper is one of the most disgusting models ever, guys. On top of it not being able to pick up scrap and sometimes just coincidentally getting you a soulstone marker, a soulstone. He protects, he picks a scrap marker, and anything within 4 of that scrap marker doesn't take damage from non-attack, non-hazardous terrain. And Mei Fang already tells your whole crew you ignore hazardous terrain, so it's pretty much only attack actions that can actually hurt you if you're nearby whatever scrap marker Rockhopper picked. And this includes Tony's defensive trigger. So I could attack him all I wanted as long as this aura was up, and the only thing he's getting from is the defensive trigger, because he could still declare it, obviously, is adrenaline. And then I just kept going nuts with that. I dropped like his whole crew pretty much by turn 4. And I took that game 8-3, I believe. For
explosives, you almost want to get hit by Tony's defensive trigger, because then you get to pack or proc bombs again.
You don't proc bombs that much past like turn 2 because you just don't, take the actions for it. I was actually using sparks at that point to start healing up my crew that he was killing. So it's like, oh, you're started hurting Mei Fang. Let's just quickly heal Mei Fang back up. And yeah, it was really just, I just wanted to protect my models from him like scoring deathbeds or something. So I just actually didn't use that trigger that much. But yeah. That was my round 3, and that concluded day 1 of the tournament. We finished by like 5 o'clock because we started at 9 every morning, which was a little too early for me, but it's a Friday, 9 o'clock. Most people have to be up anyways.
I just kept my work alarm on.
Yeah, so after this, we went out and had some nice dinner with everybody. Hung out with the TO because we had to schmooze him to make rulings our way, obviously. But no, it was we all had a good time. And then because we're here to talk about Malifaux, let's just get right into round 4. We have corrupted ley lines on standard deployment, deathbeds, claim jump, catch and release, spread them out, vendetta. Brand new, 9 o'clock in the morning. How'd your game go, Andre?
It went less than stellar, I would say. So, for the listeners, David and I played round 4, and I, of course, selected McCabe, and I foolishly boasted after round 3 that if he chose Mei Fang, I would own him, and he believed me, and that is the tragedy of my life, because Hoffman is lame and I hate him. But specifically, I thought I had a chance still because I was like, oh, dude, if he plays Hoffman 2, I can still punch his armor. I got this. And I got into my head that despite him playing Hoffman 2, that I don't want to engage, the PK and Joss, which is who I thought he was going to hire. I should play a ranged game. In order to play a ranged game, I need to bring Sadir because he's analyzed weakness, and then I can just shoot him, and then he'll die and be sad. My plan, as I thought about it, did not quite go as cool as it did in my head. And that's what I brought. So I brought Sadir, 2 Rough Riders, the Corpse Curator, and a Terracotta Warrior, which is my hidden jutsu, because I was like, oh, dude, I'm going to be able to take the hit, and instead of 4 reducible damage, I'll just take 1. But that, of course, relies on me being able to position the Terracotta in such a way that I can eat lasers, which did not come up as much as I thought it would. I think we can cut to the chase here on this one, though. Other than McCabe eating a laser turn 1, because how could you possibly not eat a laser turn 1? The play of the game goes to Peacekeeper, top activation of turn 2, sachets over the horrible centerpiece terrain, takes 2 swings at McCabe, the first of which was a red Joker for 8 damage with the crit strike trigger, which almost put him on the floor, and then the next hit, he just continued to connect and wipe McCabe off the table before he could activate.
I think it was actually the opposite. He wasn't the absolute first activation. I don't remember who went first, but
I did with a Rough Rider to move the
Yeah.
Terracotta into range of protecting Sadir, but not McCabe because I foolishly believed that McCabe would survive 2 attacks.
Also, I think
With
McCabe
8
was a
health.
bit too far forward to be the Terracotta place. But yeah, the I think I hit you with the crit strike first, I think is actually how it went. You stoned that, and then I just blammoed Red Joker you with the crit strike on top of it for 8. And yeah, that's 12 total damage after taking 4 irreducible on McCabe, and that changed the game.
Yeah. So at that point, I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty mad. But I had to like collect myself because like, oh man, diff's gonna matter. This is gonna be like, dragging your face along broken glass on the ground. But let's go ahead and get the rest of this round out of the way. And so basically, I just played the Corrupted Ley Lines game. Luckily, both my Rough Riders had stealth, so they just kind of ran off and ran most of the strategy. Hoffman was able to come back and clap my Rough Rider on turn 4. So I didn't score the last point, but I did get to at least score 1 point with Vendetta, since Corpse Curator, I'm sorry, not Corpse Curator, Rough Rider had the Saber and was able to kick the Peacekeeper down to 5 health for the Vendetta. So that was the 4 points I scored that game. And then, of course, David got a clean 7 points, which was, after losing your Master and activated turn 2, I think a 4-7's not the worst. And trying to survive being in the middle of a morale break while doing it, I at the end of the day, I'm still satisfied with how I managed to score 4 points on that board. But yeah, it was rough for sure.
No, yeah, the game, it was a very interesting turn 1, and turn 2 started interesting, like competitively interesting, and because there was a lot of like posturing and defense. The Terracotta really did matter, and then none of it mattered after the Red Joker on damage, which is why I'll never be the biggest fan of Red Jokers, even though it worked out amazing for me this time. But it just doesn't feel good to win that way, right? Like, we were having a game and then we didn't have a game, right? It was a how do I lose by the lowest amount of diff kind of question. And the only point I lost was Vendetta on my silent one to a Corpse Curator, because I was just like, I'll just kill the Corpse Curator. I don't want him around. He eats my pylon markers. He has to die. But yeah, no, my list was really standard Hoffman list. I actually say really standard, but I think I took a take that no one else takes at the moment, which is Peacekeeper, Metallurgist, Mobile Toolkit, and then a silent one, obviously, so I can have a 7-card hand. And then I took a very fun take, Mr. Spider Legs, Howard frickin' Langston, with the upgrade attached, which actually came in kind of clutch this game.
Soulstone Cash?
Yeah, Soulstone Cash.
Okay.
I was able
Can't
to
just say the upgrade. You're Arcanist. You have upgrades.
Sure.
Yeah.
I feel like the upgrade you take on every good model, and yeah, it's what you take on your big fat beefy beaters that aren't henchmen, like the Peacekeeper and Howard Langston. No, Howard actually came in clutch. One, because the map sucked. There was a lot of severe terrain in my deployment zone, and so he was actually able to, walk on it. But just another big thing that came into play against you in particular was him and the Metallurgist both moving forward and venting steam was actually pretty huge. As well as later getting off a couple heaves, because the Terracotta Warrior was really annoying for, like, how do I target, who do I target, and stuff like that. And then it was just, because McCabe obviously was no longer alive and I don't have to worry about lightsabers as much, I just made it more trivial by punching in with Howard and then just throwing him away. But overall, some very interesting gameplay that could have happened had McCabe not died turn 2. So overall,
The splashes Jokers happened, right?
yeah, there's my splash page. Literally Jokers happened. So we're going to move on to Landon's game, because there really is nothing much. Oh, the one other thing I was saying and why I brought my crew list was you banned Performers, which actually was a pretty big hit, because I ran over to, I don't know if you saw this, so I'd actually like to know, but I ran over to one of our other locals because I was borrowing his Mei Fang models because mine aren't painted yet. and I grabbed his duet because he wasn't playing them this round, and I knew he wasn't playing them this round. And I grabbed the duet because that's what I intended to hire instead of Howard, so I can have better movement on this map with this massive 2-inch bridge spanning the whole map. I'm like, I just need more AP. And then you ban performers, and I'm just sitting there looking stupid after having borrowed models.
No, I think the thing that crossed my mind, since you're already picking augmented, so the usual just like ban augmented thing didn't really come up, and I was trying to figure out like what models would I rather have dealt with, because I mean the duet with Hoffman is something that I've seen before, and because the map was so jank, I was like, if I can rob him of as much mobility options as possible, I should have an opportunity to take this. So, and because in our practice games you had taken the silent one, so I kept waffling back and forth between December Performer as the van, but I ended up going with Performer. And frankly, I, in retrospect, kind of wish you had had a duet on the table and no ice healer instead of having Langston on the table. Because one less vent steam, even with activation control, right? Like one less vent steam and the inability to heal Hoffman when you did would have been something of a game changer, I think. So I actually regret my ban in that match.
Yeah, I actually agree with you in retrospect as well. I didn't realize how clutch that vent steam was going to be. It's also really nice that Metallurgist can just obey him to do it, and it doesn't even need to eat one of his AP. I mean, I guess it eats the AP of him walking with it, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, I think
Right.
the silent one was the better ban, mostly because you got some nice like damage off on my models early, and then I just full healed it up because silent one still like 18 inches away or 16, just decides, you know, whatever, screw you.
Well, I'm glad you guys talked about why the silent one was good, because I was listening to Longton go over like, oh, I paid a silent one, I hired all this stuff, and then I hired the pick no one ever would take is Howard Langston. I'm like, wait, you just glossed over the fact that you're hiring this out of keyword model as like entirely standard, and then saying the keyword model is the one that's entirely unexpected.
Oh yeah, I think Silent One is a super common pick. I could be wrong. I've always picked it. I know Plog really likes it in his Howard matches, and it's just one of these really good models that you can throw on the upgrade to get the +1. It becomes really unkillable because it's already attuned. So
Magical training,
yeah,
for reference.
shielded to attuned model, so it's really great for Vendetta. Because its range is what 18 with the ice pillar, because I think it's a 12 plus the 6 inches or 8 inches, so it's almost like 21, including the base. You can get some pretty far out shots, but I actually don't know how far the game is. It a 12 and 2? I think it is. Either way, you primarily though use it for healing. So it's all about 16 inches, 8 for the ice pillar, 8 for healing, and all the early damage he marked on me, I'm just like gone.
Yeah, I think she was your first activation, and she put like 5 wounds back on Hoffman.
Oh, the gun's also 8. But yeah,
and then on top of that, the fact that she is a good bearer for magical training, and Hoffman kind of lacks for those. I mean, you can hire steam bitters, but la-di-da. I think, yeah, definitely would have been the better ban. Also, if you'd put the duet on the table, I think I'd have been in a much better spot. Overall.
I think I'm going to keep hiring Howard more because I think it's the thing I didn't like about Howard in 1, and I think this is pretty easy, is obviously you're in 2 you can't do the fast shenanigans with the duet, so they are inherently worse. But overall as well, Hoff 2 with the pylon markers out in different positions really allows Howard to go off in his own little angle. The extra shielded survivability is really nice, and the extra obey from Metallurgist really means that he can be a more participant model on your opponent's side of the field than he normally is, and I feel like that's why most people didn't like him. But he's been coming in clutch for me recently when I've been hiring him, so I'm actually becoming more and more a fan. But
I just have one more question. So, did the performer ban from Andre affect your choice to play Hoff 1 or Hoff 2? Because I know I had previously encouraged you to play Hoff 1 into Thunders. And like with the Terracotta, like you said, they actually have some pretty neat tech against lasers. So I'm just curious if that impacted you at all?
No, I know you tried to convince me it had more play, but when it came down to it, and I think I'm right in this, is just that my thinking was I'm going to be playing a range game with him and not a melee game. If I start playing a melee game with McCabe 2, I'm losing. The aura cancellation upgrade is going to mean I'm down a stat. He has Rough Riders. He has things that ignore armor. I banned Monk. I don't. You have to tell me if this affected you or not. I banned Monk to get rid of possible healing from low river monks, and more importantly, 10 Thunder Archers. I really just didn't want to exist. Wait, doesn't that mean I banned? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you did ban Monk. And I don't think I was ever going to hire Monk. So I, for the longest time, I had like a low river monk addiction. I'd put a low river monk with the silent protector upgrade on them, just because there's a lot of value in it. But I ended up feeling like it ended up being a crutch, and especially since like the corpse curator is so good for McCabe, I just couldn't justify continuing to hire it and still needing other stuff, because in terms of actual point scoring, like a Rough Rider is going to get you further up the board and more points scored. Where Lower Monk's just going to keep you alive, which isn't necessarily point scoring. So I stopped hiring those as like a standard issue. And while I do love me some High River Monks when they're cracked out, I needed the raw, like the range in this one, and for future matches, I think the raw damage of Min 3 beaters.
Well, yeah, but the range is why the real reason I did ban Monks is Thunder Archers. I didn't want you 12-inch picking me off with ignore armor. I feel like that's what I was more afraid of than anything.
Not
with
simply
the
more
irreducible
armor, but also irreducible, so you can't even stone it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the shielded
That would've been
doesn't
big.
work, which is pretty clutch too. Because even though he analyzed weakness, ignore shielded too.
It does.
Yeah.
That's whatever. I just didn't want him ignoring more stuff, and I think I think Thunder Archers is what I was really afraid of. So that's why I banned Monk, and I'll stick by it.
Fair enough.
But yeah, now we'll finally move on to Landon's game. How was your game?
Well, with my game, I ended up playing into Leviticus. My opponent banned Monk, which, once again, I thought to myself, oh, and I was playing Lynch too. So once again, I thought to myself, thank God, another person who has not listened to me on podcasts talk about why Kunoichi are great. And then I went to go higher, and I'm like, I can't swap out Tannen for a Charm Warder. Goddamn 2 keyword models in a bands format being active detriment to my tech. But luckily he ended up playing Levy 2, which, meant that my ban was entirely irrelevant, though I did ban Bandit just in case, Mad Dog came in, because I don't. Mad Dog makes a frequent appearance in Levy lists, at least Levy 1. And so then he ended up hiring, I think, the Hooded Rider and the Mech Rider, which surprised me, as I think I usually see the other 2 riders hired far more often with Levy. Especially in ley lines where the Pale Rider, or not the Pale Rider, the Dead Rider can just reap people right off the ley line from, like, I don't know, 21 inches away to deny points. So it struck me a bit as interesting. But I ended up taking Vendetta from Lynch onto his Hooded Rider because you're not the master, so you can be a legal target for that scheme since you're also not a totem. So the 11 stones into 11 stones bit was cheeky and fun. And I'm trying to think of other big moments in the game. I had a really, really good turn with Tannen, which was humorous to me because I was thinking about cutting him for a Charm Warder, where sometime around turn 3, I had been forcing him to continually relocate Rusty Alice so he could try and get shots off by pressuring him with Bill, Lynch, and eventually Tannen just ran next to Rusty Alice, and he started to try and hit Tannen. I told him Tannen had manipulative, so he spends his first AP focusing, fails the boring conversation flip, cheats the boring conversation flip to get the focus. I push him out because he's also in range of my Beckoner at that point to engage him with Huggy. And so then he's just got his entire Rusty Alice turn blank because the thing he wanted to do, melee Tannen, he just couldn't do. And he just failed all these boring convo duels, and it was beautiful. Which is not a thing I get to experience a lot in Lynch 2, since you put out far fewer Brilliance tokens than Lynch 1 does. But it all came together, and it was very good feeling for me, very bad feeling for him, I'm sure. So I'm sorry, Tannen. Tannen does mean nasty things to people. But basically, I hired, my typical Lynch list, the two Kunoichi, Bill, and I just tried to push him off the ley lines. He ended up getting 4 points on ley lines anyways, which was a little annoying for me, but I dove Bill in turn 1 to try and push him off a ley line, and he had the red Joker to counter my 13, so I couldn't deny his scoring turn 1. And at that point in time, I just kind of left Bill in his deployment zone to die, so I could slow down his other schemes. In classic Huggy fashion, I deleted the Midnight Stalker off the board in one hit with a double crit strike turn 2 with the 13 that I couldn't use instead. So that was nice, but ultimately I just ended up picking up his models and not losing very much in return, as the Lynch Alpha tends to do.
Yeah,
That does make sense.
That alpha really bothers me. Scares me. But yeah. I normally play factions that's not great into, so that's nice at least.
Yeah, it does tend to struggle a bit with big beefy henchmen and hard to wound models, but luckily I can just look at a faction and know if I'm going to see a lot of those in a list or not, and then decide whether or not I'm playing Lynch.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's definitely one of those picks that you're just not sure about until you know what your opponent's trying to play. But yeah, with that, I guess we'll go on to round 5. Right now, I'm undefeated. Technically, so is both. So is Landon, but you have one tie under your belt, and Andre is playing at 3 wins, a tie, and a loss. And coincidentally, round 3, I think we had a bunch of ties. So
2 wins, a tie, and a loss for 4 games. But...
Oh yeah, sorry. Math is important. Spoilers alert. But yeah, no, overall there's a bunch of, ties, and going into the final round, it was already known that even if I lost, I basically came second. There's only one person who could win that makes me third. If I tie, I win the tournament because I have a better diff than you do. Also, you would have 2 ties because, spoilers, as the 2 undefeated people, we end up playing each other. So realistically, I was guaranteed first or third, with a high probability of getting second. And then, as well as the fact that you really needed to win in order to get first. But even if you tie, you still have the possibility. You almost also get guaranteed second or third. Losing is the only one where diff starts mattering.
Yeah, I was playing these last 2 games with my cheeks clenched, as Andre put it earlier, because I didn't know how important diff was going to be to me. Because, playing that 4th game, I didn't know who was going to win, Longton or Andre. And even after I knew who won that last game, I knew if I lost to Longton, I still had to out-diff Andre in order to take second.
Yeah, and Andre
so
into important. Round 4 had a better diff than you, but because of that clutch red Joker, I was able to clap Andre decently enough, and gave you some breathing room. Where as long as you didn't lose by too much, you were pretty much podium. So I guess with that setup, we'll go into round 5, which is going to be break the line on flank. You have breakthrough, bait and switch, let them bleed, vendetta, and everyone's favorite scheme, research mission. And how did your game go, Andre? Playing for third, pretty much.
Yep, and I did manage it, obviously, but it was rather, I don't know, it started quickly, I guess I'll say that. So I was, to everyone's surprise, playing Cave 2, but the opponent that I was playing into was playing base in guild, and I wasn't super sure what was going to happen, but he ended up hiring like 1 million traps.
Were you not sure? Were you really not sure?
I mean, I kept like so really how many traps are we talking here? And it's not something I adapted to, because I mean, if I learned anything from my second game into Landon, I don't really adapt to my opponent. I like to play mostly samey lists and then just like figure out how to play around it. So that's what I did. But so the legends were true. He shoved 8 traps in your face turn 1 with the intent to continue to shove more traps as they slowly die. And I was like, nah, not today, fam. So first activation of the game, McCabe, hands himself the Know the Warrior upgrade because I like cards too much, and then just like walk charged into a pile of traps, and I killed 5 traps on the first activation. I stoned for Crack the Whip twice, and just killed 5 traps right off the bat. And then Luna handed out a saber to the High River Monk that I hired that game, and he killed more traps. Rough Riders killed the last 2. So turn 1, he hired 8 and summoned 2, and all 10 traps were dead. Turn 1, and so his plan of just like hemming me into my deployment zone did not succeed. And then he had like no coats on his on base or on his henchman Rykart. So I just started stealing his soul stones, and when we ran out of those, I started carving up his dudes. And so he did have Bernadette and Paul Crockett off to the side, scoring him all 4 points for the strategy anyway, which is why the final score ended up being close 7-5. But since I had relatively free reign of the center after stuff died, he did manage to bring down my High River Monk eventually. I would say play of the game still goes to High River Monk because Rykart walk charged him, slapped him for half his health, and then the High River Monk responded in kind by dropping him to 2 wounds with Burning 4. And then he burns down to hard to kill and couldn't hit a heal trigger on the next turn. So he did actually die to the efforts of the High River Monk, but not before killing the High River Monk himself. So that was at least thematic and dramatic. But like I said, it ended up being 7-5. I killed base. I killed Rykart. I killed pretty much everything that wasn't Bernadette and Paul off to the side. I had to go lace a crit strike with the Rough Rider into Paul to score Let Them Bleed. But like I said, once the traps fell apart, the plan kind of fell apart. And so I was able to take it fairly easily from there.
Yeah, this is actually the local of ours who taught me the trap list, like long ago when titles first came out, and why I played them on my channel a couple of times, just to try it out, because I actually didn't think it was a very good list overall to begin with. He beat me with it in a local tournament we had, right near the end of COVID, or I guess the vaccination point of COVID, when people were at least willing to be in person again for the first time ever. And I felt like I really lost like time running out on instead of like losing to the list. So I wanted to try playing it online and play it faster and see if it actually wins. But overall, the list can be good. I could never imagine running against 10 Thunders and the sheer amount of ignore armor you guys have as a faction.
And there was an aspect to that where it was like, did somebody warn you about this list? I'm like, yeah, well, kind of, but like I'm playing the same list I always play. It just has tools. Which is part of why I love McCabe so much. There's so much that he can try to take on. Like, you never start a map like, man, this matchup sucks and I'm roasted. You always have something you could do with McCabe, and so that definitely shined in that match.
There's a certain aspect of that too, right? Though, if you're going to solo a same list, not just the same master, but the same list in a 5-round tournament, like you got to suspect by round 5 that someone's going to be a bit wiser.
Yeah, I was thinking Brett did play that every round, right? Yeah, and I just double checked, and he did. He played base 1 once, but otherwise he always played base, and I think he always used the full trap list as well.
I think he even played traps that one round when he played base 1.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think he always played the full trap list. He just, for some reason, played base 1 against his round 4 opponent.
Maybe the quicksand was just that good in that round. Like, the quicksand is really good of action, so
yeah, it's true.
I could see it. There were some boards where you'd want it.
Yeah, let's see. Who did he play against round 4? Oh, he played against Seamus. Interesting.
Anyways.
Yeah.
How did y'all's game go?
Yeah. So.
Whose perspective do you want first?
Let's go with yours. You're the guest.
So, as everyone who's ever spoken to me at any length about Arcanists knows, I fucking hate Hoffman. I had to teach my new friend how to play the game when he was still starting out. We gave him the easiest list we could figure out, and that was, book Hoffman with 2 spider swarms with or maybe it was one Spider Swarm with fucking Soulstone Cache. And so I have trauma from Hoffman that will last my entire life. I'm pretty sure I can't even read novels by the author. But anyway, so my good buddy Longton drops Hoffman 2 into me. And fully prepared for that, I had declared Yanlo 2. And so I go into this match already tilted because I got to play into Hoffman, but I've got a plan. I'm just going to score some points, try and make sure the Peacekeeper never hits me, and, hopefully win before I'm tabled. Turns out that went out pretty well for me in retrospect. Hoffman 2 was not actually all that scary in the respect that I was able to throw his Peacekeeper away into some severe terrain turn 1 with a good hole in the world trigger because, you hit defense 4 when you're stat 6. Manos and Yin kind of took a flank since in break the line you get a little bit of agency in placing the markers, so I was able to put them in places such that I could get an early lead on a marker so that I could get it out to be 2 points by itself on the side. Carefully measured, of course, because you can't put them too far in the corner on diamond deploy. And then have Manos kind of contest 1 before leaping into his flank deployment for breakthrough on the next turn. What really ended up swinging it was the fact that firstly we only played 4 rounds of the 5 allocated, which could have potentially gotten Longton a tie later, but I think I was up 5-3. We decided as what the score would have been end of turn 4. I had 3 strategy points and both my schemes, and was looking hopeful into getting another scheme point for the end of the game, but we decided that was what I had on turn 4, and I think Longton only had a single strategy point and was post to score, I think, the end point for his Vendetta. And was it Vendetta?
Research mission, let them bleed.
Research mission, let them bleed. That was it. You had the reveal for research and the end point for let them bleed.
Yeah.
Because Manos had to leap that turn, so he wasn't at full health.
Yep. And yeah, it really came down to the fact that
I will say though, before I hand it over, that Yanlo really only took 1 turn that game, because after turn 1 he was stunned every fucking turn by Hoffman, which only added to my tilt because I take this master with impactful triggers that only gets to declare 1 trigger the whole fucking game, with a really important bonus action that you now has to spend an AP on.
The clutches of triggers.
It was very tilting.
Yeah, I guess I'll get to I'll explain my tilting side of it. He was winning the whole time while bitching.
Who does that, Longton?
Yeah, who does that? You apparently. Maybe. Yeah. Well, they don't. This channel doesn't know about me playing board games, so don't worry about it. But no. For realistically though, I think Yanlo has a pretty decent matchup, but it does work basically the exact way we played the game out. I think if we play 10 games, a lot of them are going to look like 5-3 going into turn 4, with the possibility of a tie and a 1-point swing to either one of us turn 5, just because that's just kind of how the crews work out in general. You're able to go wide and go schemy. You pop my Peacekeeper off into a very annoying spot on the map, which almost realistically, if there wasn't that good piece of severe terrain for you to just put my Peacekeeper in the middle of, it almost kind of feels like I could have easily won the game. But
I just wish it was also a forest, so you'd have to deal with concealing on those shots.
Right, most games would have a piece of severing terrain, so a piece of severe terrain to put it in. But the real big thing is Yanlo's able to go back, even without triggers. You're able to pop a couple of the back a few key minions, even taking down Metal Urges by just, hitting them a bunch. Also, because I had to injure my Metal Urges to put stunned and injured on you. Where it's Hofshot becomes marking Yanlo. And it was actually like a very good back and forth game, with you taking the lead early, because your crew was always going to take the lead early because I have 7 models and they're all dedicated to fighting you in the mid. I'm popping some Komenu dogs with a laser. I'm getting a last hit with any number of odd models. I think I heaved 1. I think another one died to a Peacekeeper shot, or it was a Lynx in attack. I don't remember. One of the things that really made me just like 15 minutes came up, so we knew it was going to be last turn, and I kind of declared it after I kind of was willing to concede the 5-3, following a Black Joker on the Yan Lo to kill him. Admittedly, after flipping a double severe in order to put him into kill range. It was really my play. The Black Joker wouldn't have mattered if I just put a Hoff Laser into Yan Lo instead of putting a Hoff Laser into the dog, because I just didn't think I had a shot at killing Yan Lo in time. And I was really just attacking you because I could attack you. And it was one of like the last Hail Mary plays that I was realizing once time was announced. And yeah, I ended up blacking it, couldn't kill him, left him at 1, which was clutch enough for, turn 4, and then making sure that, I couldn't score the reveal point for both. I had to be, him surviving forced me to have to choose to either score research mission or score the strategy marker for 2 points. And with that, it made it so that no matter what, I couldn't win turn 4. So when turn 4 happened, I would just lose by a point no matter what I do. And it was very easy to call it from there. Because I would need both. Because I wouldn't be able to score either the second point of research mission period or score the symbols point. And even then, more than likely, I still lose. I'm guaranteed to lose by 1. Black Joker made it a loss by 2, and with no real play around or Hail Mary play. It made it so that there was literally no Hail Mary play to make to give for the tie, because all I need is a tie to win the tournament. I'm not even playing for a win, which is why it came in a little clutch that we didn't have a turn 5 for you. Because I think turn 5, it becomes a lot more likely that game ends in a tie than in any other one. Not that you didn't have plays, it's just statistically, I think if we play it out, like 9 out of 10 times, it'll be a tie.
And that might have been the case.
Yeah. Maybe the odds were a little bit better in your favor, especially with Yan Lo surviving. Because if you win initiative, run away with him, you could still do a lot of things with him.
The thing I hadn't told you at that point is I was holding on to a 13 of Tomes, the hole in the world, whatever you tried to score research mission with Sun, who had not gone yet at that point in time.
Oh, then yeah. So
and it's stat 7 versus the willpower of whatever the fuck you try and score it with. I had a guaranteed deny, even if you drew red Joker. Not if you flipped it, but if you drew it.
Yeah, and there is the question if he lives to turn 5, but yeah.
I'm using my backline with full health. But
yeah, that's 1 laser shot and like a melee.
2 laser shots? I mean,
I was
okay.
and
sure,
the
and a
melee.
melee. Sure.
But yeah, no. As I was saying, it really was a very close game. The Black Joker, I think, guaranteed it. And then on top of that, from the actual misplay from my part, not lasering Yan Lo after stunning him, and instead wanting to kill the dog, and not trusting that I would actually hit you, because I had no cards in hand, and so post laser. So I just didn't have faith in killing Yan Lo. But I'm stat 6, you're stat 5 with injured. I really should have gone for it. I had the soul stones and the power tokens to do double plus flips, which is what I did, which is honestly why I Black Jokered. I flipped, I think on that attack, it was a 13, a 12, and a Black Joker. Very depressing.
Yeah, that was great.
So, yeah. It is what it is. That ends the tournament, and then, yeah, we have our tournament standings, which is Landon in first, me in second, and Andre in third. We cleaned up all the medals.
I just want to say I'm also proud of the rest of our locals sweeping 4th, 5th, and 6th. So good showing for Chicago in general, considering I think we were less than half the people there. There were what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Of the top 8, our
7,
local meta
8.
took 6 places.
There were, of the 25 people there were 8 people from Illinois. And
yeah.
Fewer people from our store in particular. So
10 people overall from Illinois. Although you're right, I don't recognize a couple of their names. But yeah, No, our local store did very well there, so that was always nice. Both Texas, well, I'd say both, but there were in fact 3 Texas players. No, there were 4 Texas players. Did you know the other Texas guy?
No, I did not.
Oh.
Yeah, I did not know that we had a 4th.
Oh, I think I actually do remember hearing about him. I think he was from Dallas. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess that would be why you guys don't know
It says
him.
Texas.
Yeah.
Dallas is in Texas.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, we can't be sure.
Yeah.
It is tragically a large state, so it is possible that we didn't know.
But yeah, Brian ended up placing 8th, and then the other Texans players did not as well, but overall pretty well. Bands format. I want to hear your guys' thought. We just played a whole tournament, bands format. I guess we didn't really talk about our bans for turn 5, Landon, but I ended up banning Wastrel because I didn't want to see you hire Desper, because I thought, Desper, pretty decent. You have Break the Line, so he can hop around to the lines, and, he ignores armor. I think you said you weren't going to take him, but you thought maybe about it for a half second.
Yeah, I thought about it for a hot second because he helps you win the fight a lot harder versus Hoffman because you can just steal a couple soulstones from Peacekeeper. And that can be pretty clutch, I think, having talked about it a little bit with Andre at some point during my lifetime.
Yeah, it actually kind of mattered for our game, but yeah. Because I forgot about that attack until Andre did it to me. I'm like, why is Desper going after Peacekeeper? He can't have his armor ignored. And he's like, I'm eating your soulstones. And I went, oh.
And the fact that he also stunned on that trigger is pretty neat too if you don't have condition removal for the crew, because a stunned Peacekeeper is a lot less scary than a not stunned Peacekeeper.
Oh, I say Peacekeeper. It was actually Howard, and he did in fact stun Howard. He got the stun off on one of the triggers and stole my soulstones, you 30 little guy.
So yeah, like I thought about it for a second,
but then
I realized my game plan was not to fight you at all, because that's not what you do against Hoffman if you want to win.
Yeah.
But I ended up banning December because I decided that I was okay with a Corfi duet showing up, since they're only willpower 4 when they split, and Yanlo can just yeet across the board and then 2-shot one.
And you knew about my clutch silent 1 play, and
yeah, I had seen enough Vassal to know that some people hire silent ones for the holding the upgrade and some extra healing. And while I've never actually personally seen it, I'm perfectly content to keep it that way.
Fair enough.
Good call.
But overall, how did you like the format in general?
I would say. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Tragic. Okay, I'll go for it. I would say that I actually really like the format more than I thought I would. And for someone who's normally a keyword player, like the exception, of course, is that I'm playing McCabe right now. But like for the most part, I like playing in keyword. So for me, like the band's format doesn't normally bother me as like how I choose to play the game. But at the same time, I think they're especially in the Vassal world, like we play exclusively singles just about because people are afraid of all like the double master combos. But really, when it comes down to it, if you're like fairly meta aware, you're reasonably confident what like the specific like combos that are rough to play into, a la Mei Fang and Hoffman. And as long as you have that knowledge, you can play around it and then ban it. And it's like, okay, if they want to, if Dashel wants to hire Justice as his secondary master, then you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. You just spent 17 stones on an extra beater, more power to you. And so I think the band's format opens up the opportunity to have double masters without feeling broken. And at the same time, I love it because I'm so sick of seeing Anna in every Rezzer's crew ever. And being able to force Rezzers to actually play their keywords should like invoke wailing and gnashing of teeth for them, and I relish that. But at the same time, the band's format also, like, it's this weird dichotomy, and it's very, very valuable for people who are very, very aware of like what people are playing in the meta. And at the same time, if you have no idea, then you're like, I don't know, Last Blossom's a keyword, right? And so it ends up being a format that like is really great for competitive players at the top tier, and like completely inconsequential for people who are playing in the bottom 50%. Because they
Why don't
often
you
end
just
up
randomly ban augmented?
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Clutch.
yeah. Well, I feel like augmented is just like a strong keyword anyway. So even if there wasn't any like specific cheese you're trying to pull off, like just getting augmented out of the way, especially if you're trying to get like rid of the ruthless opportunities in Arcanist or something, then like augment is just a good ban.
You know what? No. You know what? No. I heard this whole weekend. I don't understand it. What augmented model do you ever see hired out of keyword?
I've seen Joss and Colette Cruz.
Really, I have never hired an augmented model out of keyword. I would do it now for one reason, and that's because a friend pointed out how clutch it is to hire mobile toolkit. Just
Yeah, I
in
was gonna
like
say I've seen
every
toolkit
list
and
now.
medical automaton.
Yeah.
Yeah, Automaton as well.
Oh, is automaton versatile though? I thought it was for some reason.
No.
It's not.
Oh, well, yeah. That's funnily enough, that's not even a Hoffman model. That's just a model that's good to hire. But yeah, the toolkit I can see because handing out focus as your 4 soulstone model is nice.
Three soulstone. Oh, I guess 4
4
out
out
of
attack.
Out
for
of
sure.
keyword. Yeah.
So it's pretty decent for that.
Yeah, I pay a premium 7 stones for that.
Yeah, you do, and you have to attack your own model to do it.
Seems like a lot more value out of that toolkit, especially it also comes with the healing, just in case.
On a bonus too. Yeah, so you're not even passing up other good healing.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of valuable models in augmented, and so just as like a a blank standard, like yeah, augmented's a good band. But to speak to the format generally, I kind of want to see more of it. Honestly, I think it makes you spend a lot more time thinking about like what combos and what kind of things your opponent can actually bring. Because at least for me personally, like I like to bring a list and then just try to smash everything I can with it, and try to the adaptation on the table rather than in the crew build. But the bands format makes me think at the crew build anyway, even if that's what I'm doing, just so I can be like, all right, what things do I not want to see on the table, depending on what keyword they pick. So I actually really like the bands format a lot.
Landon, your thoughts?
So I'm gonna start out with the one thing I don't like about the band's format, and then begrudgingly say that I liked it despite that. So the one thing I found about bands was that it felt awkward from like a social in-person con perspective, where it's like I'm eating lunch with these people and I'm hanging out, we're having fun. When when you're playing Malifaux, you want to talk about Malifaux, right? But then like if you want to talk about lists, don't really want to talk about your spicy tech. Whereas like normally I'd be happy and excited to go into detail about like how I think this one model unlocks this one keyword or something like that. But then like if you're going to be playing each other, it's kind of like awkward, I guess, because you don't want them to like just ban it after you excitedly talk about it.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. The only thing I'll say about that is if we start playing more bands format, we will just have like an ongoing meta, and we can talk about that meta, and it'll have like then you can have interest discussion about that. This being the first tournament is the one where we try to hide our secret sauce, and you're right. It just doesn't feel great. Like knowing that I bullshit surprise.
I've always
Brian.
been a very above board player, I like to say, because I don't think like that if you have to hide something to win with it, that you are very good to begin with, because you have to be able to like if people know it's coming and you lose because they know it's coming and not because you're good with it and can play it well, I think that just means you are relying on that crutch of hidden information, or you're playing something that's not actually good once people know how to play into it, right? But and so it was a little weird to me having to play like a slimy player like that. But I think it by that same standard makes the game a bit healthier because it encourages people to play like more above board keyword lists. Like one of the reasons I actually put together and painted Yanlo stuff is because I wanted to play a keyword list for this format for most of the pools that I would otherwise not want to like hire only my standard stuff in like Lynch or in Yoko, right? It's like I knew I needed a symbols crew, and I couldn't out of keyword Desper because no one in their right mind would not out of keyword ban Desper and symbols.
Yeah.
So I think it creates a healthier format in that respect, in addition to the fact where you can ban like combos that otherwise would be nasty. So I think honestly, I would love to see it in Vassal for that particular reason, because you get a lot less of the social pressure to not talk about it during your lunch break when there is no lunch break.
Also, you'll probably I think, especially seeing in Vassal, you're just going to have like that whole community on Discord talking about pick bans
Yeah,
for
and
certain
so with
masters,
like the
and the meta
different
will be
meta
flushed
spread
out.
of it, you're
And
going
then
to be more encouraged to play above board lists.
yeah, or you'll find some truly wild bonkers secret sauce that you'll try out, and it'll probably be trash most of the time, but you'll have fun memeing. Instead of me being like, oh yeah, my meme list. It's totally a meme list, not a real list. It's totally a meme to hire Hoffman to. Definitely a meme, not something that's just bonkers broken.
And I have to say though, I was really annoyed at the disadvantage of having my tech have 2 keywords slapped on it. That did piss me off quite a bit, but it's not like I didn't win and or tie those games anyways. Though
Well,
not that
and
it would be terribly important for Levy.
I think the other meta and I mean the meta in the sense of like outside its original context, consideration for the bans is that we know for sure, and at least this tournament, that Weird is looking at what people ban. And not to say that it's like definitive proof that whatever got banned the most is getting nerfed or anything like that. But I think in addition to making players more aware of what the meta is, it's going to make TOs and Weird themselves more aware of what the meta is. And so I'm certain there will be at least a little bit of consequence to that.
Yeah, I would like that. Although that is interesting because specifically because I think a few of the bans aren't like against good keywords, they're against like models that are specifically good in certain situations. Like as Lana was saying out, like if you weren't playing Wastrels in our symbols matchup, I ban Wastrel every time, right? You're with my symbols matchup. Never mind. But in a symbols matchup, as you're saying, like you ban Wastrel, you want Desper out of there 100%. Doesn't mean Desper's broken. It just means he's good in specific parts, and I like that. I like that you can't just expect these good like out of keyword models to come in clutch for you. You actually play a keyword that you think fits the situation a little bit more.
Yeah, so like I said, I think that's one of the big strengths of the bans format, and why, despite my begrudgings of its social implications, I think it actually makes for a healthier game.
Yeah, I really want to say his name is Cole. Because he's the Arcanist from Ohio, so it has to be Cole. I was talking to him, and he was also saying like he had a ton of fun with the bans format, and he was saying like the games that he's going to TO, the tournaments he sets up, he's going to try to run them bans format from now on because of how like interesting it actually made gameplay. And the reason I loved it the most is it rewarded competitive players for knowing the game and knowing their good and bad matchups, I think, and that really felt satisfying.
I think the other aspect of the social word gets around kind of deal that is something of a negative for the bans format is that most people do not have a trunk that contains the entire faction they're playing. And so if you have like 2 keywords that you want to play between, like say I'm a Yuko 2 and Shenlong fan, and so those are the 2 keywords I brought. And you just ban out, like if you know the guy and you know what's in his kit, you just always ban out whatever other actual keyword he brought. And I think there is some kind of unavoidable aspect to that, I think.
Yeah, but this is where I'll expand on this a little bit because this also like came up specifically in our game. He banned December, and I needed a replacement model for that, and my replacement model was I need a order initiate. I didn't own an order initiate. I still don't own an order initiate. I proxied one there on the consent of my opponent because we're good friends. I honestly would never try to proxy like that against someone else, and I would just have to like slap a minor in the list or something.
I think at that point in time, you can also try and rely on the community you've built. Like you had borrowed Joel's duet a few times, and so it was rather than trying to run around the con asking if anyone can own or loan out an order initiate, just like fine.
It was the funniest thing because that is why I love this community. They're so willing to help out another person, and I bet you even against most other people I'd play, if they were like, "Oh, I have a 40 mil a random 40 mil model. Can I play this? Most, like 9 out of 10 players would probably say yes. And I had like 3 different Arcanist players who were like, oh, I have all the Arcanist models. What model do you need? Order Initiative. Each one went, ooh, that's the one I didn't actually have. That's the one Arcanist model I didn't have. It was kind of funny. So I think I was going to play with one of your 40 mil models if I remember, because I forgot
Yeah, and
it
then
was
you were
40 mil.
picky. You didn't like my model.
Well, because your model was Barbara, and I was like, let's. It was unpainted, which matters for Adepticon. That's the only reason I cared about it, is because Adepticon has a painting requirement that Weird no longer requires, which I love. Thank you guys, appreciate it so much. But
No longer requires in the gaining grounds. It was
yeah.
still required for the tournament. No idea.
For the tournament, Adepticon required them, because of the Adepticon rules, you have to have 3 color paint on your models, which is just normal, like 40k rules. And so yours didn't have it, so I grabbed one of my models and put it on a Gilder, because if you guys don't remember, Gilders are 40 mils. So if you have any leftover Gilders, you can base your 40 mils on them. But yeah, it's
Gilders.
The community really makes it feel like you don't normally need it. But I think the other key thing, as I was also going to make this point, was that I know what models in my list are potentially banned, especially with the meta. And at that point, you should know like what other model to bring in case it gets banned, right? Like, we're not talking about you need a whole nother keyword. It's like, oh, if I either take a Union Steam Fitter or I take an Order Initiative. Those are the 2 real alternatives if December is banned. And everything else I haven't an answer for. So it's really just like, it really feels like for most crews, it really should only be like 1 extra model or 1 tech piece model that you would have brought but can't bring now, and now you have to play keyword. So I feel like it would be interesting to see how often it came up that a model got banned and someone else needed to like panic fill in a model because they didn't have an alternative in their bag. I will say though, from the same meta perspective, we even talked about this a little and joked about it, but my box that I brought with me is just a metal box, and I normally just magnetize the bases to it. It has a glass pane. I think it's like an old cookie box. And it has a glass pane on the top that you can see my models in, so it wouldn't be hard for you to be like, oh, you have Hoff and Mei Fang models. Well, I guess I know what keyword I'm banning. That part, I think, will probably be the most annoying part about it, is potentially worrying about hiding models and what keywords you brought. Instead of, like, them thinking about tech pieces, they're thinking about what you actually brought to the convention, as you were kind of alluding to.
Yeah, like it doesn't feel, if you're one of those players who's just gonna like look at a guy's bag and ban based on that instead of like the above board, well, I should ban this type deal. I think that goes back to my earlier point of like, you should be playing the game for the ideal as opposed to the actual, right? Like if you're trying to get by using like these hidden tactics, or like trying to hide information or abuse like a player because of any limitation on him, as opposed to just playing a clean game, that, you know, you're not playing a good game. I don't know.
In order to respond to a comment, because they're saying that bans kind of force you to have 3 keywords, or, you know, knowing how to play 3 keywords. You're only banning after master pick, so you're never banning a master or a keyword in general. You can play only 1 keyword if you really want to. You just have to know that if you bring a tech piece model from out a keyword, you need a replacement for that model. So, because, I mean, for example, like, if I could ban Transmortius from, you know, Texas Brian, I'm banning Transmortius from Texas Brian. He's a monster on that keyword. But you can't ban masters. So they do get to pick whatever master they want, and they do get to hire their own keyword. It's just, and the versatile models of the keyword. So any of your versatile picks are guaranteed to be safe. It's just specifically non-versatile, non-keyword models. You can target those. Like, I'm playing against Wastrel, and I have armor units, and I really don't want to also have you have even more irreducible armor damage, so I got rid of the Thunder's Archers.
Which, quite frankly, I feel like most new players I see are really only playing in keyword to begin with, or maybe hiring a master from like their other box if they, subscribe to that jazz.
Yeah. So I guess just to go over it again for anyone who's kind of like new to the format, and I guess I should have done this at the top of the round. The format is you declare faction, you declare masters. Before second master pick, you declare what you ban, what keyword you ban, and then you do second master picks. Then you do hiring, and you cannot hire a model that is non-versatile and part of that keyword. If it's a versatile model of that keyword, you still get it. But yeah, I think everyone I talked to at Adepticon came away being like, I really love Ban's format. I loved forcing those scum players who only play out of keyword models, tax in 4 models, all explorers players, which is me, and force them to be like, you can't have this model. It's not your keyword. And also just the simple fact that, it fixes double masters, because I think we did have like people who were playing for fun. And really, it's the only double masters I think we saw this tournament besides me, tricking Brian's to let me hire Hoff too. The only real double masters we saw were kind of people playing like for fun with it, and they weren't really good double masters. They were just kind of interesting in what they wanted to play.
Yeah, I think as far as placement's concerned, 6th place, Joe played Misaki, hired into Shenlong on the last round once. And then after that, you have to go down to 11th place to find another person playing with more than one master, So I think it shows, at least to some credit, that the bans either are effective at warding off people from hiring a second master, or the counterpoint that the second masters you could hire after bans just aren't incredibly competitive. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not as good as hiring, like, let's say, Desper. Like, it's more important to ban Desper than it is to prevent you than to let you hire Mizaki too, because Mizaki doesn't have Don't Mind Me, for example, because she's normally, I kind of see her in symbols, but you can actually defend symbols from her, unlike Desper, who just gets them. So it allows for a lot of interesting play like that. Other than that, I think we're broaching 2 hours. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Maybe if anyone wants to write something in the comments they have questions about or want to answer, I guess write those now and we'll try to comment on them. But otherwise than that, final thoughts, you two? Andre?
I had a great time. Glad to come out and finally, I had come to Chicago with the intent of taking revenge for David coming down to Texas and beating me in one of our local Houston tournaments, but it looks like I will have to continue to hone my craft in order to take back that particular defeat.
I will say it is the only thing that mattered to me was that I couldn't lose to you or lose to Brian, and I had to still maintain my best player in Texas title. And I was hoping beyond hope I just didn't have to play you two, because I wasn't feeling confident with my Mayfang, especially after our practice games. I'm like, yeah, this feels strong, but I feel like I'm winning because in our practice games you were playing Nekama, and Mayfang and Rockhammer just counter that. And I was just like, man, if he really does the switch to something that counters this, I'm not sure I'm going to come to space with Arcanist yet to really feel like I got it. But you never forget how to play Hoff.
Yep.
Hoff is just
riding a bicycle.
Yeah, like riding a bicycle. Exactly. Big ass fat death lasers. Landon, your final thoughts?
I was just impressed that we got such good turnout with the community. I know things have been trickling up since COVID's been ramping down. We've been seeing a lot bigger tournaments, and so it wasn't the size of Captain Con, mind you, where we had all the content creators from everywhere. In fact, we had relatively few content creators at this one. I'm sad about that, but hopefully they can all make it out next year. I know we have all of our commitments, but it gives me hope for the Faux Tour that we'll keep seeing large events like this And I'm just really excited about the participation and happy that our local meta I've always said that the Chicago meta is one of the more competitive metas that we have out there, despite our size as a relatively small community of, I don't know, there's like what, 8 or 10 of us. And so I was very happy with our performance as a whole, not simply your performance and mine.
Yeah, no, I also, because we don't get talked a lot about when you talk about like American metas or even like top metas, because especially in like in M2E they talked about like East Coast a lot, even though we went there for a team tournament and won it. But it is nice to see Illinois, Chicagoland repping those tournament wins. Seeing our locals actually do well, especially because a lot of us had to play each other.
Yeah, so I mean, you want to see some good competitive foe, come out to our events sometimes. I know our local henchman, John, always posts them on the forums. John is a great henchman, lovable guy, and takes his losses like a champ. So don't be intimidated. Come on down. We'll be happy to have you.
Yeah, we got a lot of nice representation from the Ohio. Not as many Nebraskan players came over. Normally, the Iowa and Nebraskan people come down, but COVID obviously is a huge concern. And I know some people have been. The reason why we didn't see a few of the content creators, at least that I've talked to, is because they're saving and to go to DC instead of to our Adepticon. And all I can say to that is, Chicago is awesome. Come down here, guys. Cheap flights, cheap hotels.
I know
Don't
I've already booked my time out for Nova, so I'm excited to see that. Since if they're all saving their juice, we should have a nice big event.
Yeah, we'll have to go down there and win their tournament. We have to keep winning tournaments. Really show them how good Illinois is.
And then we'll get people traveling.
We took Captain Con. We took Adepticon. Now onwards to Nova.
Are we skipping Gen Con? We might skip Gen Con.
Yeah, we're it's kind of fun.
Andre's trying to convince us that Gen Con is actually good for phone now, right?
Yeah, I mean, how do I say this? Like, there's so much hype surrounding Gen Con outside of Malifaux anyway, and so to like skip out on Gen Con, I don't know, it feels wrong somehow. Especially since it's also such a big deal for Weird with like, their cycle of releases and things like that. And I'm hoping.
Just want them to run a 5-round.
Yeah, I was about to say the last 2 years, well, not 2 years, because it was just this last Gen Con and then the pre-COVID Gen Con for the M3E release have been 3-day tournaments.
Not 3-day, 3-round.
3-round, yeah, sorry. 3-day tournaments would be great.
That'd be sick. 8 rounds.
But no, they do their 3-round tournament, and it's just like Gen Con. The hype around Gen Con is the only reason to go to Gen Con in my mind, because Gen Con has a lot of other cool, interesting things to go down. I know if I go to Adepticon, I go to Nova. I mean, particularly Captain Con. Not to diss whatever else goes on in Captain Con, but I didn't even see what else went on in Captain Con. I'm doing it for Malifaux. I'm flying out to these places to play Malifaux, and I really don't have like an interest in doing other things. And Gen Con is in particular the one that seems just like prohibitively expensive to me, because the hotel rooms in Indianapolis are like skyrocketed in price, because it basically it's like the convention center of like the world. I don't know why there's so many business conventions going on in Indianapolis all the time that hotel prices are ridiculously high. And Gen Con ticket prices are also insane. So it always just felt like, why would I go there for a 3-round tournament? It's a 2-hour drive for me, and I can't like muster up the drive down there and the drive back just because it's like, why? Why do I care?
3. Is it really only 2?
It's 2.5, I think, yeah.
Okay.
So for all of the Weird employees that are waiting on our every word, would you consider going to Gen Con if it was in fact a 5-round?
Yes.
Yeah, I would. The big thing that I remember we complained about the one time we went there is that Longton went undefeated. There was like 12 people, and we didn't even play the guy who got first.
Yeah.
Like neither he nor I.
Neither of us played the guy who went first. We ended up having to play each other 3rd round, like we do every tournament apparently we go to. And yeah, I play against someone who is I played against it was just like, did you play against good players or not on your way to the top place? Were you able to club baby seals or not? Because I mean, as you
Yeah.
know, like third edition, unlike M2E, there's no like true massive blowouts in my mind. Um,
Well, and
you
I think
can't have like 8-0s are it should be almost impossible to do against a good player. And I think he 8-0'd like he 8-1 two people in a row. I think even his like round 3 opponent was like a big blowout, and I had to play Landon and have like a 2-point game or 1-point game, I think. And it was just
It
like,
was close.
yeah,
I think one of the things that really like left a bad taste in people's mouth about the Gen Con 2021 is like the way that it like the matching got done. Because I know that my opponent round 1 for 2021, it was Jordan, so I beat him 7-1, which also shouldn't have happened because we're both from the same meta. But that aside, beat him 7-1, and then he plays into the guy that came off of a bye round 1, despite having a grossly negative score from round 1, and then that guy goes on to take first, and I don't know how that happened. And then another one of our players, Rob from Texas, uh, he was at the highest points table up to that point for round 3, and then he won that game, and I don't think he even podiumed, and I think it left a really bad taste in his mouth for sure. And so it ends up being like a 3-round tournament with 32-man slot. It's just not good. It's not a good look. It doesn't feel good. And so I'm hoping that they listen, because originally I think they cut it down to a 1-day thing because Gen Con's Gen Con and you want to do other stuff too. But I think for the people that show up to play Malifaux, for that the kind of the grand stage, you're hoping for that belt kind of deal, that it needs to be a 5-round.
I will
Just
say
Go
that
ahead.
you brought up the belt, and that's the thing. That's the other thing that pissed me off. I got second and no reward. There was no medal, no belt, nothing. I got second place, and they're just like, "All right, you can pick a prize," and I'm like, "All right, cool." Like I mean, cool.
I will say I was actually really impressed with the prize support we got for Adepticon. The first,
Agreed.
second, and third all got very generous gift cards and these cool looking medals.
Yeah,
And that was awesome.
yeah. I think Weird's been doing great. They really helped out in Captain Con, with prize support and sending Brandon to TO, and they helped out here a lot, sending Brandon to TO, and the prize support they gave him was amazing. So, mad props to whoever's running like the tournament positions of whatever outreach Weird is doing for tournaments. It's literally mad props to you guys. I'm really appreciating how it is, because I'm gonna transition to answering a couple of questions that were being asked, but like the big difference being like M2E, we really didn't see much tournament support. They had the henchman like support system, but that wasn't. I mean, like the guilders were cool. It just doesn't feel as nice, I guess, as real like receiving real prizes and other things. And when that system vanished, there was kind of like nothing in between. And to see them like really coming back, really encouraging like these tournaments to be played and helping out, you just love to see it. It's great what they're doing, I think, right now. But we're all M2E players here, right, Andre?
Technically, I mean, I played, I think, a total of 3 tournaments in M2E, and they were all local to Texas. Now, there were some big ones. Like, we had an 18-man tournament in Austin at one point, so like they were pretty good-sized tournaments. But I would hardly call myself, an expert on how the meta in the Americas was during second edition.
I think we're kind of in the same way. We came in late 4th ed, and we played very competitive scene, in Illinois, but I don't know that Longton and I traveled. I mean, you traveled out to
I
the
did.
Showdown, but I don't think you ever went out to like Nova or anything.
No, because I don't. I mean, Nova happened during college, but yeah, because I was in Well, yeah, I was in law school for a big chunk of M2E.
Regardless of that, I think if I had to take a swing at it, just knowing that our competitive meta probably not shaped, but like was representative of the wider like competitive spirit of the actual game, I'd say that I think third edition is at least much healthier than the late second edition ever was, which felt very much more like who could kill the other guy faster, and the fastest kill was like activation 3 of turn 1.
Yeah, so I really do think M3E is actually more competitive than M2E, and I think I know for a fact like Landis really agreed just because of what he said. Because if you guys really remember a lot of the big M2E lists, I'll take credit for one of the lists, even though I was only the one piloting, not really the one who made it. But you had the VIX list with a bunch of A bombs to gain activation control, go in there, murder everybody, win the game. And then you had Duncan Bill's list, which was the Sonya list, which is just pack Sonya up with explosives, give her plus to damage, plus to attack, throw her up the board with Grimwell, companion into her, stat 9, blow whatever the fuck you want. Also, give her plus 2 to defense and willpower while you're at it. Why not? And that list was just like prohibitively from playing, and you don't feel like they necessarily, the game felt a lot more swingy on like how cards got flipped over actually what it felt to play competitive, partially because I think only so many people were playing these competitive lists instead of just some interesting things, and that you ended up most of these lists just decided tournaments, like were they able to pop off or not, and that's like what happened. Because like Colette can do some amazing things, or not Colette, Kaladi could do some amazing things. But every time I played against you in a tournament at M2E, I just alphaed Kaladi and killed him turn 1 pretty consistently. Oh yeah, Storm Mizaki, when that was a thing, and you could just do irreducible damage with a blast marker, and you just place it a mile away from whoever you were attacking. Like there were so many amazing alphas that just dictated the game that it didn't feel like you had to think about the rest of the game. Like the scheming and stratting part only came up rarely if you didn't just lose all your models turn 1.
Yeah, so remember when we're talking about stuff like Huggy Alpha and 3rd edition, where it's still a healthy game afterwards, I think. Even if you like have the ability to one-shot some important model, it's only one model, right? Like the game exists beyond
one non-henchman, non-hard to wound model.
Right, but I'm like other alphas I think probably can get out that sort of tougher model as well, given enough effort. But like you just got to remember that there are points on the board even if you lose like your cool centerpiece dude.
Yeah, and those at least Adepticon. It's how our locals won the Team Showdown tournament. Was our locals were the Bills brothers, plus Brett, actually the guy you played playing the trap list, and Victor, who isn't really playing Malifaux anymore.
He left us for Sigmar for a bit.
Yeah, hopefully he'll come back because Victor's a pretty cool guy. But yeah, no, they ended up winning because honestly they played some pretty meme. I don't even want to say meme, just really strong alpha lists. I know Brett was running the what's Reva's henchman name? Vincent.
Vincent St.
The Vincent.
He ran the Vincent list where you just from the shadows Vincent and then just blow up a model, like literally first activation in the game. And there's not much you can do about it.
Follow it up back in 2nd edition, where she could just start buried and unbury from the corpse and then die.
So you basically just played the whole game in their deployment zone. And if you really wanted to meme, you brought Killjoy as well to do the exact same thing. And yeah, it's prohibitive. It was just really brutal. You could do a lot of really nasty things turn 1, and that's what it rewarded. Or you got blown out by like gremlins. You with the Get Lucky trigger, whatever the hell it was called.
Dumb luck. I don't want to talk about 2nd edition anymore.
Yeah, so that's it. We think M3E is so much healthier. It's a lot more competitive. You're rewarded for good plays. Don't get me wrong, good lists are good lists, but if you looked at what was broken in M2E, there was like a couple standout, horribly offensive lists that just were above and beyond the rest. If you look at M3E, in my mind, sure, there's some really good lists and there's some really good keywords, but almost every faction has one that's equally as competitive, it feels like. And that I think that's almost goes to show, because if you look at our top list, sure, you see Thunder's taking a few spots, and so does Arcanist. But I will say this. I honestly believe that's because that's just what good players happen to be playing at this tournament. I think if I really had to like rank some of the more broken stuff, Bayou are amazing, and Rezzers are also beyond approach. Guild has some really ridiculous stuff. It's like it's really hard for me to say that there's a faction that's not that good right now.
And I will say that to kind of speak to, I think part of what the question was of like he's naming specific players rather than specific lists of like whether the meta is still as competitive. I think a lot of M2E was defined by the lists, even talking about that. Whereas, if you played a guy who was like, the king of like Sonya Alpha, as soon as you put him on any other master, he was like pretty okay, I guess. And the same thing was true even in the tournaments that I played in my little microcosm in Texas. Was like it wasn't the player that was just like rocking your world and he was so cool and he understood everything about the game. He was like he'd played the same list like 2 dozen times. The alpha went off or it didn't, and then you took first or you didn't. And I think because of the much more balanced, less everybody alphas or dies nature of M3E, the players themselves end up being able to understand the game a lot more and be a lot more competitive as players. Because I would gladly take anybody in the bottom 50% playing the most broken thing I can think of, rather than playing either of you two on any mediocre list that you have to end up playing, just because the skill of the player ends up mattering a lot more in third edition, I think, than in second.
Yeah, for sure. I think that is a really good point. Especially because as you're saying, like I'm saying, like what alpha list these players were known for, and they played that list and really only that list, and that's why you would like win tournaments. I don't even think you could do that anymore. Like I mean, we're talking about Andre here, who soloed a master for the longest time in M3E, and I mean, you kind of realize that you have to. Maybe I'm wrong in this, but you're realizing you have to get off that and play a couple masters. I don't. I think band format really precipitates that in particular, which is why I like it. But I don't really feel like you can solo a list anymore, and you just can be that list and known for that list and win because of that list. Now you actually have to be like really good at adapting to other things and changing your list to adapt to other things and playing different masters against different factions, because there's a lot more interesting counterplay, I think, going on right now, and you're
I
rewarded
agree
for
with that for the most part. Like the reason I chose McCabe as my master for this tournament is because I sought out that same ability to basically take anybody in a match and be like, all right, cool, I at least have like a 45% chance of winning this. Because that's just how I always played. And Nikima, I think, just to kind of touch on that point specifically, while I did get famous on her, she was in a moment in third edition where she didn't have anything that truly like directly countered her. Like she had hard matchups. Like Hoffman still sucked to play into, even in GG0 and GG1. But like the counterplay that she had available to her between like Blade Rushing and Black Blood meant that she had a chance into those matchups. And so if I just knew Nikima that much better than the Hoffman knew their models, then I might be able to pull out a win. It wasn't like a guaranteed thing, but I had a shot. I will say that I think Malifaux Burns kind of shut down a lot of like the backdoor ways to beat people, at least for specifically Nikima, because like I can't Blade Rush a PK to death, because he's or the Black Blood, like Black Blood, I can't do anymore because I've got to deal with the Metallurgist first, and that's enough of a pain in the butt to kill before I start trying to kill other stuff that Hoffman has the upper hand again. And so there was a lot of like counter tech that got introduced that kind of turned Nikima off. Same thing with the Rock Hopper. Like I had play into the Armor Cruise, whereas now I don't because of the models that came with Malifaux Burns. So it's just why I had to switch. But like McCabe, like I said, I think could take most people if you really set your mind to it, which is why I made him.
Yeah, but and to just like further make this point, I guess, and that's one of the things I really like about the introduce of the different titles. I love the idea of titles so much; it allows a lot of interesting things to happen. But also the fact that your Nekima list was like a very solid list, and I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe I'm being too mean, but I think the longer you played it, the more people got used to playing against it. And then me in particular, I stopped like fearing it because I felt like I was really in a comfortable spot playing against it after a certain point of seeing it enough that with the Masters I was used to, I was good at playing against it. now that you're playing McCabe, one of the things that scares me is because unlike Nekma, I don't know your exact list really anymore, and McCabe can bring in like interesting counter things. Honestly, that's just a 10 Thunders thing, but I think that brings a lot of more interesting things because I'm having to worry about all these things you can hire when I'm playing against you, and I know you're a very good player, and it's a lot more worrying when you can see when someone knows how to play their keyword very well is able to play against you instead of you knowing just how to play against them.
I agree with that.
And that's one of the reasons I hop around so much, so no one can catch what I'm doing. But no, I hop around because I play broken things. But that's just me.
I just can't wait to be known as the Lynch guy, and then someone shows up and I declare Joker, and they're like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, like I think that's one of the, as I was saying, like I really think it's important to know multiple masters because a Lynch Alpha is good-ish against certain things, but then you play Yoko or Yan Lo because against specific factions or in specific matchups that you're kind of expecting, like you're able to switch to actually interesting counters, and we see that a lot more, and that's why I think M3E is really just a much healthier competitive zone because it really rewards play like that, I feel like. And that's why you end up topping so many tournaments like you do, because you know your faction really well, you know your matchups, and you know your masters.
Yeah, I do feel like the matchup thing is a big thing I want to highlight because like a lot of people wanted to make a big deal about the fact that I soloed Lynch for all of Captain Con, both the CCI and Booty and Plunder, but really it came down to the fact that for the CCI we were able to pick the matchups, and so I just never had something I didn't want to play Huggy into. And I think it was just luck of the draw for the actual Booty and Plunder, where it's like I just never saw a Rezzers player because there were like 3 of them, and 2 of them dropped day 2. So it was like a perfect storm of like, not that I came to the event intending to solo Lynch. I think I actually didn't intend to play him every round at all at any point during the event. It just kind of happened that way.
Yeah. And Joe did mention that he played Misaki in his game 1 and 2 as well. So I guess he double mastered 3 of his games at least.
Damn it, they're OP. They
he got 7th doing this, guys. It's broken.
6th, excuse you.
Slot
no, 1 is player in those rankings.
Oh, right. Thank you. Very, very good catching that. Yeah. I mean, Captain Con, I think, was a great example of a why bans formats needs to exist. Only for me, because I feel like I was the only one doing something truly disgusting with the Nexus Kids Ivan 2 matchup. Or Ivan 1. I mean,
Maeve was hiring second masters for a lot of her games as well.
True. But she didn't, get a medal.
That's fair. I mean, it was showing up in other games there as well, I think, is that people were trying the 2-master thing since it was on the table.
I will say, I love Maeve. Her Explorer second master picks always kind of threw me for a loop on her lists. But she did pretty well, I think, at that tournament anyways. But those, I wouldn't ban the master she was bringing. And I think that kind of goes to show, like, how healthy Ban's format is. I love Ban's format. I'll talk about Ban's format forever. I really want almost every tournament to just do this now. Even though I'll never be able to do Mei Fang augmented again, I really like the concept of being able to ban certain things and experiment with new fun things because we're toning down the overall broken capabilities of some of the top edge masters.
You heard it here first. Gen Con needs to be Ban's format. It needs to be 5 rounds. Get on it. It's going to be great.
If they do that, I'll go. I'll make that statement now.
We'll find a way to be there.
Job permitting. If it's on the weekend, I will drive down Saturday morning or Friday night and drive back Sunday if I have to. If you guys do that, please do it. Also, Vassal, I know we have one committee member here. You should go. You use your N-ways and start convincing the TOs running it that they should try more band formats. Because we've got Iron Scorpius ones. Let's get some band formats in there. I'd love. Oh, this tournament actually is closest to the bands format because they have the out of keyword limit. So as cute as that is, I honestly think just do bands format instead. It's honestly nicer.
Yeah, I mean, I think correct me if I'm wrong, Andre, that they're starting to let people outside the committee run events if they aren't already. I don't even know that Trick's a committee member. I think he just stepped
He's
up and
not.
said, "I want to run an event." So, like,
Yeah, we put out like a forum that if people wanted to run an event, because we basically we decided that running an event every month between the committee themselves was a lot. So we had like 3 or 4 big events that we wanted to run, and then for every other month we were like, hey, if you want to run something, then just send us a sign up sheet. If it looks cool, we'll count it towards the overall score for Vassal World Series. And so yeah, like you said, Trick is not part of the council, but he did get to pick and play how that all is going to go.
yeah. So
Yeah.
honestly, just like set it up long and you can practice for running the league by just like running an event for bands.
That's true. That's very true. Maybe I should try to reach out and set up whatever the next tournament slot could be. I'd definitely be down for that. Yeah, I love bands format that much. I really would like to try to get more bands format out there and really see what the meta develops into, because I'm really hopeful from what we saw here at Adepticon that it's a very healthy format, and going into it, it looks like it'll be a very fun format to play in. Can we also say that I'm just so happy we had one Bayou player and they didn't play Brewmaster every round? Isn't that great?
That sounds great.
I was so afraid of Brewmaster just coming and ruining my life. But yeah. The last comment I've seen was Joe asking us about the train. We talked about a little bit, how we kind of like the train. I'll just say this right now. You guys said you liked it. I didn't. I mean,
I don't know that I said I liked it. I said that I don't feel like it impacted any of my games.
sure. As
It
somebody,
wasn't the worst.
yeah, it wasn't the worst. It definitely wasn't the worst. I'll give that to Gen Con 2 years ago, where they just didn't have terrain. But the I will say, as a player who, as Arcanist, who didn't really have a lot of ability to get around severe terrain, and it really was just Mei Fang. I didn't feel like the terrain was that nice. A lot of maps that had like no concealing terrain. A lot
I
of
think
maps that had a lot of severe or just like massive blocking in front of it, and I don't know. I like a variety of terrain, to be honest.
I think the hallmark of a good map is not whether it had this or didn't have that or X or Y, but rather whether or not you had to actually think about it when you were bringing a list or when you were playing the game, right? Which is actually part of why I like Hazardous so much, despite the fact that we don't play with it in person, because that's something you can put on a board that immediately changes how the game is played.
I feel like the second thing to say to that, though, is it has to be like symmetrical mostly. Because a lot of that was one of the things I was happy about with the maps we saw at Adepticon, and why I don't actually hate it. I just kind of am met on it to a slight dislike, maybe, is the maps were actually decently symmetrical. Like, I never looked at a map and went, "Oh, this side of the map is fucked for my opponent," but it's amazing for me, right?
I think for that exact same reason, I disagree with you in that I feel like I never sat down at a table and I'm like, oh, I need that corner. It was always just, well, I guess I'm on this side. I'll sit down here and put my models on it.
I prefer that a lot. I don't like how big of an advantage you get from just 50% winning, because we didn't even have the whole like lower rated players, the attacker. So you just 50%, you can just massively influence a game if a map is made poorly. And
No, I mean, I guess that much is fair. I am used to, the niceties we have with Vassal where we get the attacker defender based on ranking. So I would suggest that would be something that is perhaps looked into. But
yeah, but even then, like round one, it's going to be a huge factor, and even final table, where the top. I mean, sure, you maybe want to give a slight advantage to the guy who was able to get a better diff, but I don't feel like it should be as huge an advantage. You already get to see kind of where they're deploying, by only deploying half your crew and getting to seeing their whole crew. That I feel like if a map is really advantageous, talking about like Hazardous Terrain, like I'll say about this, there's a Vassal map where there's this like giant ice lake in the top right part of the map only that's hazardous slow. If you ever actually play with that as hazardous slow and you're playing corners on that map or for God's forsaken reason, one person is literally just out of the game. they're just if they don't have incorporeal crew, they're out of the game, and that should just never be a thing. And I really think that maps should be mostly ish symmetrical, to a degree. But yeah, I don't know. That's my opinion. Andre, do you want to weigh in?
I mean, yeah, there's certainly, I think Vassal, because, they're not, curated by a TO in particular, because anybody can make the maps and just put them on there. And then sometimes people pick maps that were like, oh, yikes, I don't know why we had this on here. You can certainly get some more, unhealthy map balance, I would say, for picking terrain. And while I didn't like some of the maps at Adepticon, because some of them are just like, here's some sand hills and metal poles, and you're like, yeah, okay, so this really doesn't matter. All the way to like the haunted house map with like the two massive bridges, where you're like, all right, cool. Either you have like vertical ignoring or flight models, and you just get to dominate this without a lot of recourse, or you just have to like completely ignore them. There's definitely some of that going on, but to its credit, it was at least vaguely symmetrical. But I think for the most part, Adepticon did okay with the terrain for the most part. Like I said, like not every map's going to bat 1,000. And I personally like to see some concealing and some blocking on every map that I see. Some severe, that kind of deal, just because it always gives you like a variety of choices to make. Because if you just have like, here's our saloon town, it's only buildings. If you wanted to stop, cast type actions, then just like good luck, fam. I don't like that very much, because there's a lot of times you have matchups where it's like, cool, I don't have any concealment generators and I'm playing into Pandora, so if there isn't forests on this table, I'm roasted.
I'm gonna put that on the people theming, not being creative enough in their theming. You want concealing terrain, you put a crowd of people in there, you put some dust.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to admit, I mean, these TOs are setting up like
30 boards.
Yeah, 30
you have
boards.
some limitations that are
tables.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
I think we had 20 boards at this convention. And it's just like, yeah, you can't feasibly have like amazing terrain for each one of them. And I do agree. I hate it when people go like the thematic route and then they're just like, oh, look at how amazingly cool all this looks. And I'm like, it has no good terrain. Honestly, as much as I absolutely adore, because I really do the weird terrain, like seeing the really good painted like weird terrain, whatever they ended up calling it, is amazing. But guys, you got to add some other things to that to give like lampposts with concealing and other cute things and thematic that you can do that don't like are just like, I have these really cool houses and building blocks that make a lot of really good cover.
Citadel trees are really carrying the forest representation on tables right now, I think. And if they could release something else that was also, plausibly severe concealing, that would be nice.
Yeah, honestly, I'm just gonna throw it back one more time to one of my favorite tables from MusonCon, however many years ago it was, that just had like a base with people on it. Like that was one of the more creative things I've seen for like area terrain that was not a box.
Oh yeah, we see that in Iowa all the time. They have this because that's where MusonCon is
right.
It's like a thematic pub map, and it's a crowded like tavern, and they just have crowds of people as like good forests. Basically, it's basically treated the same as a forest, and it's really cool.
That is awesome.
I abused the hell out of it last time I played a tournament there. That I think I ended up winning, and I put a grave goo in it, and it was a really big piece of terrain.
Poisoned all the people.
I poisoned all the people. It was pretty funny, but yeah. Terrain's hard. I get it. I can't blame TOs too much. Vassal has the benefit of being able to pick one map everyone has to play on, and that's really great. But we oddly enough just don't make good Vassal maps.
I'll get to it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the terrain was perfectly okay. That's how I would describe it. It was okay. It was cool, thematic, looks amazing. Gameplay wise, is okay. Could have used some more concealing in certain maps, yeah, but overall, I think currently we have enough good answers, or maybe I'm just being biased because I have Vent Steam, that most factions that need concealment have a way of getting it. Like when I played at Captain Con, it was a very similar, I think, terrain question where it's like most of the terrain's pretty good, pretty symmetrical, but it's like, oh, this map has literally no concealment. It's like, well, that's fine. I can drop shadow markers everywhere. Like I have answers. I can do things. But yeah.
Cool.
With that, I think we're winding down. I will say, in general, trains should not have hazards on them. Land's just wrong on that one, but there is some funny things you can do with that, as long as it's good and symmetrical. Other than that, I think we'll probably try to end it here. Do you have any last thoughts?
Thanks to Nick Westbrook for letting me borrow his entire Ten Thunders collection, because I'm a sad lazy boy who didn't have enough time / effort to paint my own Ten Thunders crew. Thanks, bud. I appreciate it. You really helped me out.
Is that why you couldn't come?
You stole his models from him and then just left him at the airport. That's actually how it went.
I don't know where your boarding pass went, bud.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Landon, final thoughts?
No, I think I'm actually good here.
All right. Well, I guess I'll close it out with that. Thank you very much for coming to Adepticon and coming onto this channel. It was awesome seeing you guys in person. So yeah, thanks for coming down. And other people, really come down to Chicago. I mean, worst comes to worst, I'll pick you up. I'll pick you up from the airport, and I probably have a spare room or two. So Adepticon next year, guys, come down.
He'll even let you eat at Kura Sushi after he kicks your teeth in.
That is, I did feel I'd still owe Brian like $12 for pizza.
Just Venmo him.
Yeah, I'll just have to send him my Venmo info. Or PayPal, sorry. Yeah. No, yeah, thanks for coming down. More people should come to Adepticon. Truly great event. Lots of fun. I'll probably talk about our locals when they happen, if anyone wants to come by for that. Any of people around the Illinois, Chicago area. We'll post about it, and you can come take on the top 2 players from Adepticon. Other than that, I believe you guys are doing something in Texas?
We are. It's the Texas GT. I think we have a snappier name for it. I think it's like the Bayou Fodown, because Houston is apparently called the Bayou City. It's going to be happening the second weekend in October, 7th, 8th, and 9th. It will feature a 5-round tournament, as well as a henchman hardcore for those of us that like small-time lame events that no one cares about. And it will also feature a kind of a tavern space, and it's the only thing going on, so you don't have to worry about hotels jacking up the prices because of all those people coming in for that cool big event. It's just going to be us Malifaux. We have a big new gaming space at the Dragon's Lair in Houston that has enough tables for us to actually fit 32 plus players in a GT. So please do look out for that and come on down when it comes up. We're also considering doing like a VIP kind of thing with, like I said, the tavern that the Dragon's Lair also has in it for like food and alcohol and stuff. So come check it out when we post that up.
Was that the place that we had the tournament last time?
No, that was their old
area.
location.
Because they have the new location. Got it.
Correct.
All right. Well, yeah, go down for that. Other than that, I guess I'll shout out, as we already did, Trick's upcoming tournament he's running for April. I think you have until the 2nd to sign up for that, so go do that. There is a 15 soulstone, I believe, limit on out-of-keyword / versatile models, I believe, as well. So that'll be an interesting, different little meta there that's similar-ish to bans, but unfortunately will not allow second masters. One soulstone off. Probably intentional on that one. Well,
I
most
think
second masters
it will not allow any second masters.
Oh,
I'd have to double check, but there are, to your credit, masters that would.
I can't hire one Nexus kid.
Single Nexus child.
I adopt this lone child. Yeah. So I think that's the last thing to shout out. unless you have something else to shout out, but I don't think we do.
Mm-mm.
All right, I'll end it there, and I wish you guys all the best of luck in upcoming tournaments.